basketball now, as we look at how they were built for the Boston Celtics and what lessons we can learn from the championship team coming up. Appreciate you mentioning. Appreciate the follow. Appreciate you chatting. Thank you for the compliment. We finally got the technical aspect of this a little bit worked out. So really appreciate it. Trilly Seb. Greatly appreciate you following along. If you ever have any questions, let me know in the chat. I will try to keep this on format as much as possible. If for no other reason, then I put each segment up on YouTube after, and it just makes editing easier. But I am going to try to get to as many questions as I can from the chat at the best time. But now, let's look at what we can learn from the Boston Celtics for team building going forward. So we start with Jason Tatum. They used the 3rd overall pick in 2017 to get Jason Tatum. They traded the 1st overall pick, which turned into Markelle Fultz, a pick that they got in a slew of other trades, which again, you can listen to the podcast for that one. But yeah, 3rd overall pick. That was a common theme because they also used the 3rd overall pick in 2016 to get Jaylen Brown. And that one directly comes from the Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce trade. And so one of the things, like we did this with the hockey the other day, we do this with basically everyone. We now have our foundation set with Tatum and Brown, and there has been a lot of question about those guys until this year when they were just so clearly the best team in the league. About can you win with them? What can you do with them? Is one good playing a 1B situation? Are they too similar? Now we know. And I do still think the payment of Jaylen Brown is going to be detrimental to this team moving forward. But for right now, you have one of the best players in the league, so whatever. So now your foundation is set. How do you build up on that foundation? They go out and get Drew Holiday. They acquire him from Portland for Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, a 2024 first that turns into Bud Carrington, and a 2029 first that we'll just worry about later. And so Drew Holiday is absolutely one of those, like not the foundation tier, but one of those next guys above a role player, but below a superstar player that help you win. He was so integral to so many wins for the Boston Celtics in the postseason. And a phenomenal get. And really, like they tried it with Brogdon, they tried it with Williams. The first round picks don't matter to them, so just go for it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Derek White. They acquire him from San Antonio for Romeo Langford, Josh Richardson, a 2022 first, which turns into Blake Wesley, and a 2028 first, which obviously hasn't happened yet. Again, he was such a great pickup for a team that kind of needed a point guard, or not kind of, needed a point guard, and they were able to go out and kind of pinpoint a guy who was going to fit in this offense. Defensively, he is brilliant as well. Like he just... all those little things that you need to win, he does those in spades. Amazing. Unbelievable. Like, I am such a big fan of this guy, and he was so important to this team. Kristaps Porzingis, they acquire him in a 3-team trade. They acquire him and a 2024 first. Those go to Boston for Marcus Smart, Danilo Gallinari. I don't think they had to give up any other picks in that particular trade. So this is where some of the smart team building in this process comes along. Because you get Porzingis, who, like, again, part of what made Boston so successful this year, they did get best case scenario from basically everyone. But you kind of need that, right? Like, again, you look over my shoulder here. There is a poster or a painting of Kawhi Leonard. That team won a championship because they got beyond best case scenario at the time you assumed from Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet. You finally got best case scenario from Kyle Lowry in the playoffs. You got best case scenario from a one-legged Kawhi Leonard, and also you got best case scenario from the other team's legs kept exploding. And so you need that to win championships. Very rarely do you have, well, everyone else sucked, but this guy was good, and so they won a title. It's like LeBron has done that, and that's kind of it. So you do need best case scenario to get that. And you got that from guys like Porzingis, from White, and from Holiday, and some others as well. But Porzingis, we all knew what he could be. And it was just a confidence that they would be able to get that out of him. And they did. And he just fit in what they were looking to do so well. If you wanted to like flash out and guard him, well, okay, now your rim protection's gone. And Tatum and Brown can just fucking annihilate you getting to the rim. And if they're going to, if they're just going to leave him, he can beat you from three. And then, okay, well, whatever, he can also beat you off the dribble, and he's a big dude, so he can beat you down low. When he is healthy and when he is on, he is such a difficult player to defend, and it just complemented everything so well. The other part of this, they were able to get a first-round pick in that because they were bringing in Porzingis and just kind of taking him off of the hands of people. Also, that there was a high value of Smart at the time. And he was a bit of a heart and soul player. And so that was greatly critiqued in Boston and in NBA circles for a team that kind of had a reputation of not being the toughest to play against and not being the toughest to kind of throw off their spot, so to speak. To trade away the heart and soul of your team was a very difficult move, I think, for them to make. But I think it allowed Brown and Tatum to grow into that heart and soul maybe a little bit more. Not saying that Marcus Smart was holding them back at all. I think Marcus Smart is absolutely a championship level player if he can fit into the certain role that he needs to fit into. But it kind of forced Brown and Tatum to step up in those ways, and it allowed for room for Derek White and for Drew Holiday to really kind of flourish, and they ended up kind of being better versions of Smart anyway. But long way of saying, they get a first-round pick in this. They use that first-round pick and flip it in the Drew Holiday trade. So you go out and get a very key part of your offense and your championship run, and you're able to bring in another asset that you use to then go out and create more of that foundation and more of that championship pedigree with the acquisition of a Drew Holiday. Al Horford, he gets acquired in a deal along with Moses Brown and a 2023 second for Kemba Walker, a 2021 first, and a 2025 second. Horford, the emotional backbone of this team, and played significantly more minutes than anyone thought he would or could in the playoffs, and gave them everything he had. He is not the reason they won, but he is such a valuable part of that team in some of the things that he is able to do. And when they needed him to elevate his play, he did that. He was great. The other interesting part of this is Moses Brown. Moses Brown gets flipped for Josh Richardson, who again, they flip in the Derek White trade. And so you are seeing, okay, we're going to bring in these assets and maybe they don't necessarily fit exactly what we need, but we can use them in other moves to try to make this team better. And that's what this team did beautifully. This one wasn't 100%. The 2021 first that went to OKC ends up being Alperen Şengün, who I think is fine. A good player, I think. So that's one, like, I don't think Boston fans are going to be looking back like, yeah, we won the title, but we didn't have Şengün. But he is still going to be a guy, I think, that you at least notice in the league. Going forward. And then just rounding this out, Peyton Pritchard, 26th overall pick in 2020. Sam Hauser was an undrafted free agent in 2021, and Luke Cornett was a free agent signing in 2022. And so what did we learn from Boston here and how they built this team? I think this was a masterful job of, and it's weird to talk about human beings like this, but for team building purposes, asset management. They went out and they tried to make their team as deep as possible. When they got Brogdon, when they had Robert Williams, when they had Romeo Langford, when they had all of those guys, they tried to have, okay, we have these three guys at the top, with Tatum, Brown, and Smart. And now let's filter it out and have this like high-level bench unit where we're not going to have this significant drop-off going forward. And then they ran into Golden State, who had like 1.5 good players, and they won an NBA championship. And I'm not going to say that that was a light bulb moment for Brad Stevens or anything like that, but I do think it was a bit of a, all right, this maybe isn't going to work. Because what do you need to win in the NBA? The NBA, more than any other league, is a star-driven league. And that was always something when we talked about the Raptors. Like those teams that were losing to LeBron, it's like, yeah, but the bench mob. Like, the Raptors have the best bench in the league. It's like, that's great. They played 8 minutes. LeBron got 50, and we just lost by 30. So depth maybe doesn't matter. You need some of it. You can't just have Tatum and Brown play 48 minutes every night, and then have the bench be minus 25 and you win by 2. Like, you do need some depth, but I do think that there is a recognition in Boston that, okay, that the depth thing can't be our calling card. We need to go out and get a starting unit that we can trust. And so they turned that depth that they had, the Brogdons, the Williams, the Langfords, and those guys, and they were able to turn that into, like, trading 4 quarters for $1. And we know those trades are really difficult to work with. And so they were able to turn those into Drew Holiday, who was phenomenal, Derek White, who was phenomenal, Kristaps Porzingis. And also, they were able to needle out some little pieces, whether it's a first-round pick for Porzingis, whether it's also a Moses Brown, and they're able to flip those then into other bigger deals. And so they did such a great job of kind of the way you build winners in the NBA, where you turn a number of different assets that might be into something that absolutely is. And to Toxic's point in the chat, benches are shortened in the playoffs anyway. You need 8 guys. You can do it with one really good one. But you need 8 guys that you can throw out there. You need, I would say, probably 1 to 2 at this point, really, really, really good guys. And then you need probably like 3 or 4 quite good guys, and then a couple of bench dudes who can help. And that is how Boston built this team. And so it was such a great recognition of, okay, what's our championship foundation? Tatum and Brown. Let's build around it. Marcus Smart maybe doesn't fit the ways that we need. We kind of need a bit more of a ball mover. So let's go out. Let's get a Derek White who fits in this role really well. Okay, well, now we don't really need Marcus Smart. Let's go get Kristaps Porzingis, who provides a shooting option that we really don't have. I know Tatum thinks he is that. He's not. We don't really have that length out there, both in terms of, like, stretching the floor, and also he is a big, long, tall guy. And so that provides rim protection that they didn't really need, or didn't really have, because they also moved Robert Williams, who couldn't stay healthy, for Drew Holiday. They just had such a great recognition of what pieces worked, what pieces didn't, and then taking those didn'ts and fitting them onto other teams to get more pieces that worked with their group. It is a phenomenal job of asset management. And so when you hear later on this year, yeah, maybe they don't have the star power, but this team's deep, that equals first or second round exit. You want to get to this championship point, deep kind of don't mean shit. You need Tatum to step up, you need Brown to step up, and you need those secondary pieces to be at a championship level to go out and hoist that Larry O.B. There you go. Basketball. The NBA preview continues. Yesterday, looked at how the Boston Celtics built their championship team. And for the audio-only folks, there was the podcast that came out very early today on the Boston Celtics trade tree with the Brooklyn Nets. So today, we are going to continue with the what did we learn from last year and look at the accountability. And so this one, I just kind of handpicked a few over-unders that I missed on, and we'll see what we learned from this. So the first, I got wrong. A few that I missed, a few that I got right. One that I got wrong, the Boston Celtics. I had them under 55.5. I thought banking on the help of Kristaps Porzingis wasn't going to be good. I thought that Brown showed that he was overrated in the playoffs before, and then everything clicked, and this was the best team in the league all season long. No questions asked. So, oops. This is still a really good basketball team, and I haven't looked at what their total is yet, but that was a swing and a miss on my part. And so if we're looking at lessons, that was just kind of a misidentification of talent there, I would say. Another one that I missed were the Toronto Raptors. I went over 36.5 on them. I thought that there was actually a chance that they would be able to kind of keep some things together. And also, you had Masai Ujiri, who had never really blown this team up before. So I thought the Raptors were going to actually make a bit of a push for it. And nope. Swing and a miss there. And then the last two that I missed, Memphis in the playoffs and the Clippers out. Memphis in the playoffs was based on, well, I mean, I'll come back at some point, right? And and then he's hurt and he's gone for the year. So now they are building up again here. So that one was just kind of an injury miss. And the Clippers, I was banking again on injuries. I thought that this team would be old and would be too banged up and not be able to make it in the playoffs. So, oops. Stuff that I got right. the New York Knicks at over 45 and a half. That one felt very, I mean, I feel, I was going to say, it felt like a lock. I got it by 5. Like, we didn't clear this one just outstandingly. We just kind of only just kind of got it. Philadelphia under 49 and a half. Again, with no Embiid for a lot of the year. That did kind of help us out in that area. Orlando over 37 and a half. That was one that felt really good to hit on, where it just felt like early on, okay, this team has taken that step. Out west, Denver over 53 and a half, Oklahoma City over 44 and a half, New Orleans and Minnesota both over 44 and a half as well. That was the murky middle in the West last year. Is there was a bunch of teams that everyone was excited about that had these young players, and they're, you know what? We're just going to, some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be not. You guys try to figure out who it's going to be. And so they had a similar over-under, I believe, to Memphis as well. And then, whoops, on that one. But again, I think one of the lessons to learn from this one is that, A, guessing along with injuries can be a little bit difficult to do, but also we are now coming into a time where, or at least last year was anyway, where there was a lot of young talent that we weren't really sure who's going to hit, who's not going to hit. And some of that really hit in big time ways when you look at Oklahoma City and you look at Minnesota. And so we have this great boom of talent that has come in over the last little bit. And I feel like in the past, the regular development of, okay, well, maybe it'll be good this year, and then another step here, and then another step here. The steps are being jumped through, right? Like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, there we go, is legitimately one of the best players in the league. Same thing with Anthony Edwards, and those guys proved it in this season. And the same thing goes for Zion Williamson, what he is able to do as a star on that team. And there's a lot that still needs to get figured out for sure. But this is one of the lessons that I learned this year, is that the regular development path for some of these superstars just isn't going to be regular. And so I think to San Antonio, where I think people are going to be maybe a little bit hesitant, like, oh, they'll take a jump. So you know what? Maybe they'll take a really big jump this year. So that's kind of the lesson I learned from that. The NBA season is rapidly approaching. I cannot wait. And just in getting ready for the previews, that there is so much to be excited about in the NBA this season. One of the things that's always fun is to see players level up, to see these breakout stars either reach the potential or surpass anything we ever thought possible for them. And today, we are going to look at 5 players who are candidates to really break out in that way this season. I'm going to start with an honorable mention, so I guess we're talking about 6. Benedict Mathurin for the Indiana Pacers. Injuries kind of slow him up, but I think, and now the main viewing I got of him was against the Raptors, who weren't providing the most resistance, but I do think that there is a player in there that can be a very dynamic and very exciting offensive player on a team that kind of allows that skill set to thrive anyway. That this is a guy who can step up in a big time way and can really go out there and make an impact offensively. I think he is not going to be the main option or even close to that on this Pacers team with Halliburton, Siakam, Turner as well, even Nembhard. Like he is down in the pecking order a little bit, but I think he has an opportunity, if he can stay healthy, to really come out here and show what he has offensively. That's already too much talk for an honorable mention. Number 5, this one's cheating, and so I'm not going to go super in depth on it. It's Victor Wembanyama. We're going to get into the top players in the league later on this week. He's not on there. He will be next year. And it's like I did this in the NHL one too. He is going to be the guy who comes out here and goes from being, oh yeah, top 10, top 15 to maybe top 3. He's going to get MVP votes this season. I am so high on him. And what really drove it home for me was the accountability episode we did the other day, where we went back and looked at the predictions from last year and what we can learn. And what we learned is that we weren't high enough on the potential breakout for some of these young players. Like Anthony Edwards took a step, and it took Minnesota far past what people thought they were going to be. Same thing with Oklahoma City. For a couple of years now, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has taken those steps and far surpassed expectations for Oklahoma City. I think that's going to be the same here with Victor Wembanyama. There is nothing he can't do. If he can stay healthy, and we just saw him do that, the sky is the limit for this guy, and there are actual pieces around him now, this is going to be a very good very good basketball player this season. At 4, a little bit of homerism, I have Emmanuel Quickly. I think that he and Scotty Barnes work really well together. I think that he was kind of lost a little bit in the Knicks offense, and then to come into the Raptors mid-season, it didn't click in the way that I think it can. And so maybe this is another Precious Achiuwa for me, and 3 years down the line, I'm going to be like, no, guys. This is the year he breaks out. But I do think that this is the year where, in Rakovic's offense, with Scotty Barnes as this kind of 1-2 combo, I do think that they are going to define some things. And so I think we are going to see the best version of Emmanuel Quickly that we have seen. And I think that is going to get him. No, I don't, this is not one where I think he's going to get MVP votes or anything like that. But I think we're going to kind of see the potential we thought we had in Emmanuel Quickly for a really long time. At 3, it's Jabari Smith. There are so, like, you could pick most of the Houston Rockets for this particular selection. But I do think that he is the one on the whole team that kind of stands out as the one who has the opportunity to really rocket, pardon the pun, into the stratosphere in the NBA. I just think there is a skill set there that really looks like it can be unlocked this season. And so I think this is the year that he takes a big step forward for the Houston Rockets. At 2, I have Kuminga. There is going to be a lot asked of him. There was a lot that was concerning about him last year and a lot of frustration with him. But I think that now there's no Klay Thompson. I'm not saying Klay was holding him back, but there's no Klay Thompson. It is Steph Curry and Draymond Green, and that's kind of it. They need Kuminga to step up. I think given this extra opportunity, he is going to really thrive in this role and step into the player that has been untouchable in trade discussions over the years and has kind of been that guy. And so I think Kuminga really breaks out this season. Just a quick note, Deeds, super appreciate the subscription. Thank you very much. Always love having you in the chats, and love having you part of the Vampire League, and very much appreciate the subscription. Thank you very much for that, Deeds. All right, number 1 breakout player. By the way, Deeds, Flames talk coming up here in just a second. We'll get to the hockey stuff here in a moment. But at number 1, it is Cade Cunningham. It has not been an easy time for Cade Cunningham with Detroit. And I think because of injuries and the general irrelevance of the Detroit Pistons as a basketball franchise for the last little while, we've kind of forgotten how good Cade can be. I think this is the year he reminds us. I don't want to say that they had this amazing offseason, but they did go out and add some actual veteran NBA players. They overpaid for Tobias Harris. You have to do that when you're Detroit and you're bad. But there are actual real-life NBA players on this team now, and that's not something they've always had. And so I do think that given a step up in the quality of players around him, that we are now going to see Cade Cunningham start to reach that potential we thought for him when he was coming out of the draft and he was the obvious number 1 and he was the apple of everyone's eye and everyone was tanking for him. I think this is the year that he really does kind of reach that level. And I don't think he drags the Pistons into the playoffs, but I think the Pistons are at least going to be on like an in the hunt playoff board with a few weeks to go in the regular season. I think that Cade can get that team to that point, and that's why he is my number 1 target for breaking out in the NBA this season. Love a list on this show, don't we? It is time for the NBA preview to continue, and these lists are often hotly debated. So whether it's in the chat or if you're watching later on YouTube, let me know if you disagree with any of these, because this was actually a bit of a tricky one to put together. Talk about maybe a talent level dropping in the CFL. That's not happening in the NBA. There are tons of talented players across this league, and so whittling it down to 10 was a little bit difficult to do. Coming in at number 10, it's Anthony Davis. I think because he's paired with LeBron, people forget how good this guy is. He stayed healthy all of last year and was just an absolute monster for the Los Angeles Lakers. And he's just, when he is comfortable shooting, he can do it all, and is just, I think people really do forget how good this guy is. So he comes in at 10. At number 9, it's Jalen Brunson. You get the proof of concept in the playoffs. He has turned into an absolute superstar. You get a slight bonus point for taking the discount to help the team win. But in terms of what he can do offensively, there are few in the league that can keep up with him. And he has shown the ability now to just have those games where it's like, hey, you know what? Don't feel like losing tonight. Let's not lose, hey? And just carry this team. He has made so many players around him better as well, and so that is why he gets onto this list at number 9. At 8, it's Steph Curry. Probably too low. For some, too low. For some, they would argue that it's too high, and this is a lifetime achievement thing. But if he was on a team that was being even a little bit more competitive, people are still talking about him as a 2 or 3 best player in the league. And I get it's the NBA. A whole lot of the team's competitiveness should be on you. That's not the case in Golden State. There is nothing more you could ask Steph Curry to do. Still the best shooter in the history of this sport. Still an amazing ball handler. Still amazing without the ball in his hands as well. His movement and the cuts really help open up the offense. Interesting to see what it looks like now that Klay Thompson is officially all the way gone. But Steph Curry is still one of the top 10 players in the league. He comes in at number 8. At 7, it's Joel Embiid. Last year leaves a bad taste because of the injuries and because you have a close to the season that looked a little bit rough for him. It gets a little bit better in the playoffs. It was a heck of a series against the New York Knicks in the first round. It was much must-watch TV. But now, presuming he is healthy, and presuming that he'll be ready to go, this is a gigantic season for him. This needs to be a year where he proves it's not just I can win MVP, it's I can win rounds in the postseason. I can make it to my first Eastern Conference Finals, and I can really be a guy who can carry a team in that way. There would be, I think, a lot more of a conversation around him if he hadn't had the game he had against Serbia at the Olympics, where he looked phenomenal against Nikola Jokic, who comes up a little bit later on here. But there needs to be, I think, that real big playoff performance for Joel Embiid. Guys who have had that before. At 6, Jason Tatum. He wasn't the best player on his team at the back part of the postseason. But overall, he's been the best player on that Celtics team for a really long time. He is not as well-rounded as maybe he thinks that he is. He settles for a three-point shot a little bit more than you would like, but defensively he is great. As a ball handler, he is fantastic. He's great at attacking the rim. He is a good distributor as well. And you get the proof of concept with him going out and helping the Boston Celtics to a championship win. He has had some unbelievable playoff performances. There just isn't a whole lot this guy doesn't do. And so that's why he comes in the top 10. At 5, this one might be, controversial might be a bit of an overstatement. But Anthony Edwards. I have Anthony Edwards over Jason Tatum. I just feel like Edwards does a lot of the things that Tatum does. And he does a few of them better. He attacks the rim a little bit more aggressively. Defensively, he is legitimately one of the best defensive players in the league. And now it helps when you have Rudy Gobert behind you and a very good defensive team just in general. But Tatum also has a pretty good defensive team as well. And I just think Anthony Edwards, for as young as he is to already be as talented, I think he deserves to be in the top 5 in players in the NBA. At 4, it's Giannis. Speaking of y'all forgot about me, Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's still the Greek freak. Injuries have slowed him up the last little bit. And so we have had, in very important viewings, we have either seen a limited version of him or just no version of him at all because injuries have kept him out. But still, when healthy, phenomenal defensive player, excellent offensive player as well, limited shooter, but the athletic gifts that he has and the work ethic that he has does outweigh any limitations. And I think this year, having a full year with Doc Rivers, having a full year with and training camp and all of that with Damian Lillard, and if there's any health to Chris Middleton at all, I think we get a reminder of how good Giannis is. At 3, it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The fact that he has continued to take step after step and grown as a player in the ways that he has been very impressive to watch and has just been it's been fun to watch. He can take over games, he can score, he can shoot. He's at least good enough defensively that he can guide you into the very good defensive players. And he makes everyone around him better offensively. He really is the total package. Coming in at 2, it is Luka Doncic, who is kind of just all of those things, but bigger. And again, the proof of concept, we get his team to the NBA Finals. There were a couple of games in the Finals where you kind of question, like, what does this guy have? But offensively, he does things that no one else can do in a way that no one else can do them. You wish there was more of an effort defensively, and you wish that there was maybe a little bit more of a conditioning edge that he may have, but the gifts and the talents that he has are so clear, and there is a very real world where he is number one on this list very, very soon. But in at number one, it is still Nikola Jokic. He's big, can play the game small, but can also play the game big. That there is no way to actually defend him. And even on a team that was limited by injuries and was kind of bagged after a couple of long stretches in a row, still almost took his team to the Western Conference Finals. He is an unbelievable shooter. He is one of the best passers. He is the best passing big man, in the history of the sport, and just one of the better passers, regardless of size, in the history of this sport. Defensively, he can turn it on or off. But you talk about making players around you better. Very few have ever been as good as Nikola Jokic as doing that. And so that is why he comes in at number one. We may as well just dive right into the the NBA season preview. The league, the season is getting closer and closer. I'm getting more and more excited for the NBA. And in doing kind of the prep for some of this, kind of realizing this is such an awesome time for the league. And we kind of discussed this a little bit yesterday, looking at the top 10 players in the NBA, but the amount of talent that this league has. Like, this was the first time since I started doing these back 3 or 4 years ago that LeBron's not in the top 10. And that, like, he has certainly fallen off a little bit. But he has fallen off, and so many players have risen up that there are just an unbelievable amount of talent. And I do think that part of that is why we will probably be getting at least 2 expansion teams coming up pretty soon. But all of that talent, where does a lot of it lie? Today, we are looking at the top 5 most talented teams in the NBA. Howdy, Toxic. Howdy, Toxic, and howdy, Deeds. Yes, thank you. Thank you for popping in. I gave Toxic a bit of a shout out before, but I do want to say hello to Toxic and to Deeds, the all-stars of the chat, as always. Coming in at number 5 for the most talented team in the NBA, it is the New York Knickerbockers. The Knicks have the turnaround they have. Like, when we look back 5 years ago, if you were to tell yourself back in just before the pandemic even, that, oh yeah, so just so you know, the best team in the NHL is going to be the Florida Panthers. And one of the best teams in the NBA is going to be the New York Knicks. Like, just giving you a heads up on all of that. You would have thought it would have been insane. But the Knicks have done a great job of, and it's one of the things we talk about when we do the team building episodes all the time. They built that foundation, they've set that identity, and now they are building around it. And the more I have talked to people who have played at high levels in sports, the more I think that identity thing is actually quite important. You need something when shit's going sideways. Like, look, this is what we do. Let's get back to doing it. It's something to bring it local. It's something I think the Calgary Flames have struggled with for a very long time. And I think they have tried to go the route of, we're gonna be like water, man. We're gonna, whatever style you play, we can play it. And I do think there is a value to that. But when you see in like mixed martial arts, John Jones, like, I'm going to do the thing you're best at. I'm going to do it better than you. George St. Pierre was very good at that as well. But both of them had that foundation first. You look in the National Hockey League, the Florida Panthers, they have, I think, the talent that they can kind of outskill you. They have the grind that they can kind of outgrind you. They have the defense, they can play the defensive style. They have all of these different styles, but it started with setting that identity with guys like Huberdeau and Barkov and Ekblad of this really tough to play against team, and it kind of blossomed from there. The Knicks have done that here in the NBA, where they hired Tibbs, and they're like, we are going to go all in on making this be a Tibbs team. This is no longer, the identity of the Knicks is no longer going to be, let's wait for a superstar to come here. After Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were like, hey, deuces, we're going to Brooklyn, which worked out great for them. After that all played out, the Knicks, I think, understood, like, look, this isn't working. If Brooklyn has passed us for KD and Kyrie, which was a layup 3 months before the offseason, I think it was a wake-up call for them. And so they were like, okay, we're getting Tibbs, and we are making a Tibbs team. And they did an amazing job with that, to be able to build this roster around those guys. And now you have then you go out and you get Jalen Brunson, and that helps, right? So now we have set that foundation, that identity. Now we need to go get like kind of the superstars who fit in with that. And to be fair, we didn't know Jalen Brunson was going to be this level of superstar when he was acquired by the New York Knicks, but we did have an understanding that he was pretty good and he was going to be a pretty good fit on this team. And he turned out to blossom, and then everything kind of fit around him. And now one of the final pieces that is added is Mikal Bridges. And now you look at the talent on this team. Bridges, who I think is really good. Brunson, who made the top 10 players in the NBA list yesterday. You have Julius Randle, two-time All-NBA player, and they're already like, wonder where he's going to fit. Hart has been unbelievable at different times. DiVincenzo won them playoff games in the postseason. They have done a really good job of filling out talent that fits what they are looking for and building off of it. I am so high on the Knicks. And they are one of the teams where I just think the sport is better when they are good. And right now they are very, very good. And things are pretty fun in the NBA. At 4, it is the NBA champs from a couple years ago, the Denver Nuggets. They were higher on this list a couple of years ago, and certainly last year. But each year they're just losing a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And these are the dangers of having championship teams in salary cap worlds. And you're never going to apologize for it. I'm not saying, yeah, you know what, actually winning the championship was a bad thing for Denver. That's certainly not the case. But to lose KCP, and then Bruce Brown is gone, and they've kind of lost a bit of this depth as things have kind of played out. Now all of a sudden it is a big 4 and then a lot of question marks. But it's still a very good big 4. Jokic, again, the best player in the league. I guess spoiler alert for the top 10 players in the NBA list that we did, if you haven't checked that one out. But Jokic, very good. Jamal Murray, has had a tough Olympics and has had a tough time staying healthy. But when he is out there, A, fits with Jokic perfectly, and B, is such a great creator, such a very good shooter, and attacks the rim so well. You have Gordon, who is incredibly important to what this team does defensively, and MPJ, who is such a skilled scorer when everything is going. With that top 4, you have to consider this one of the best teams in the NBA. At 3, it's the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards has been such a great breakout these last couple of years and has grown into being one of the best players in the NBA. He makes the top 10 list yesterday. You have Karl Anthony Towns, who, while incredibly flawed a lot, is also someone who can, score really, really well and can at least be a good big body that you can put on other big bodies to keep them from dominating in ways that big bodies do. And then the other pieces around, like Gobert, is what he is. And getting benched in the Olympics, not a great look when it's for France. But he is still one of the best defensive players in the NBA. And I just think with that trio there, and then some of the very, very good pieces that they have found to kind of build around that, this is now a very good roster in Minnesota. And so they are in at number 3. At 2, it's Oklahoma City. The moves they made this offseason have rocketed them up. You already had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Chet Holmgren, and all these other pieces to build around. And then you turn Giddey, who you couldn't even play in the playoffs. You turn him into Alex Caruso, who was created in a video game to fit this team perfectly and to fit what they need. And then to go out and get Isaiah Hartenstein in free agency. This is a perfectly built basketball team. And the only reason we don't believe that this team can go further is we haven't seen it before. But they are, I think, so clearly the best team in the West. And I think we could get to a point by like January or February where we're going to look back on this list and be like, why were they, 2 feels low. Why weren't they higher? I think this team is that good. That they acquired, again, talk about team building, they make a gigantic trade to get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and every draft pick from the LA Clippers, which has worked out great, by the way. And they have now been able to build up an amazing foundation. And then again, what do you need off of it? Well, we don't need the superstar. We got that in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Some crazy how. In a trade with the Clippers, we have drafted well. Now, let's go out and acquire these pieces and just do the finishing touches on this. They get that with Hartenstein. They get that with Caruso. And they do it perfectly. But in at number 1, it has to be the Boston Celtics. Jason Tatum made our list for top 10 most best players in the NBA last season, or going into this season. And he wasn't even the best player on their team in the NBA Finals. Jaylen Brown took a gigantic step forward last year, and that was not something I thought he had. I was very underwhelmed with Brown 2 playoffs ago when Tatum went out, and all of a sudden it was, oh, by the way, this guy can't dribble to the left, which is a scouting report that we gave guys when I was playing junior basketball in grade 8. And that should not be something that happens in the NBA. But he absolutely elevated his game. And then Kristaps Porzingis, who won't be ready for the start of the season, but the talent he has when it comes to shot making, being a big dude as well, and then rim protection, Holiday and White both elevating their game and the talent that they have. And then some of the other guys, some of the bench options who can come in and just launch threes. Pritchard, who is the greatest half-court shooter in the history of the sport. This is, again, we went over how this team was built. It is a phenomenal example of taking a team's depth and turning it into superstars and guys who fit a championship model. And Boston 100% deserves to be at the top of this list. So they are the most talented team in the NBA. All right, the NBA season, so close. So many intriguing storylines to go over. And so today we'll go through a few of them, looking at the overvalued and undervalued teams in the league. So, who's overrated, who's underrated? Let's start with the negative. Who's overrated in the NBA this year? Coming in at number 5, it is the Milwaukee Bucks. Their win total is at 50.5. That is one more win than last year. Now, you can make some pretty compelling arguments that Milwaukee's actually going to get a little bit better going into this season. With Giannis being healthy, with Middleton and Lillard being healthy, a full season with Doc Rivers as the coach, just providing a little bit more stability and a bit more of an identity than they had before. I do think that there are some real opportunities for that team to be successful. However, for them to get over 50 wins this year, basically everything has to go right. Giannis has to fully, healthily play like 75 games. Ditto probably for Middleton and for Lillard. They're going to need to figure everything out defensively and probably need some guys to step up because also the East is just very good. And so I have my worries that the Milwaukee Bucks, the window has kind of closed on this group. And I just feel like enough teams have passed them by that 50.5 feels insurmountable. And so that's why I have them as an overvalued team this year. What about the Utah Jazz? They're at number 4. They won 31 games last year. Their total is now 29.5. But it always follows the same pattern where you have a decent start to the year. Everyone's like, oh, wow, look at this. Like, if the playoffs started today, the Utah Jazz would be in the play-in. Isn't that neat? And then we get to around January and they start to get their brains beaten and they trade off any pieces that anyone would be interested in. And then it all kind of goes downhill. Now, maybe there's a little bit less appetite for that now that they've signed Lauri Markkanen to a contract extension. But I do have still some concerns about Utah, and especially since this draft year is going to be, I think, significantly better than the last one, there is going to be more enthusiasm to lose, let's say. And so I do think that Utah probably goes under that one this year. At 3, it's the LA Clippers. And this feels a little forced almost at 39.5, but Kawhi is injury prone. I think that's pretty safe to say at this point. Dude has some trouble staying healthy. Paul George is gone. And so it is now up to Kawhi and James Harden to lead this team to the promised land, which means that it is up to James Harden to lead this team if anything happens to Kawhi. So on the nights where Kawhi is load managed, on the nights where Kawhi is a little bit banged up, it is the James Harden show. And we have seen over the last little while, that does not equal winning basketball. And so that is where I think a lot of the concerns are around the LA Clippers. I think this could be a really ugly season for Los Angeles. At 2, it's Miami at 44.5. They had some injury problems last year. And so I think you can kind of explain that away. And then again, they had some injury problems and they still finished at 46 wins. But this is still a very unremarkable roster to me. And we are getting, like, there's some uncertainty around Jimmy Butler. That they made a big move to bring in Rozier, and then he couldn't stay healthy. And I I think he is a much better 3 than he is a 2. And if there's going to be any injury problems with Butler or anything like that, I think that's forcing too much Terry Rozier into your lineup. And so that's going to be, I think, a big problem for this team and a big concern for this group. And so I don't. Again, I think for 44.5, you are expecting best case scenario from basically everyone. And we could get to a point with a undrafted, or not undrafted, but with a expiring contract here for Jimmy Butler, that he gets moved at some point. And then the wheels fall off out there. So I think there are more scenarios where this goes bad out in Miami than there ones that are good. And at number 1, I already know someone from the YouTube comments who's going to be a little bit upset about this. It is the Philadelphia 76ers at 52.5. Everyone's getting adjusted. I think there is going to be an adjustment period with Maxey probably wanting a little bit more responsibility after just having an unbelievable year last year. Joel Embiid fully healthy for a year with Maxey as the guy. They didn't have that as much last year. But they did have it for a stretch. Like that's not the biggest part of this. But also now integrating Paul George into this offense, who I do think can be a little bit chill, but also does kind of need to get his. And so I think you are looking at a team that is going to try to get adjusted while also being very wary of protecting Paul George and some of the injury issues he has had. Protecting Joel Embiid, who missed all of last year, or not all of last year, but missed a very large chunk of last year with an injury, and then played in the Olympics a month ago, and is now back, and we're just assuming going to play 82 games. And so I just think there's so many different things that they are working around. They're 100% going to be the playoff team you wouldn't want to face when we get down to April, but 53 wins, I don't see it. I think there's going to be a lot of puzzle pieces going in and out that is going to make that team a little bit difficult to put together. And then now the undervalued teams. Who's underrated this year? At 5, it's the Orlando Magic. At 47.5, with the younger players getting another year of experience, KCP bringing that kind of winning pedigree to the group and all of that. I think that the Olympic experience for a few of these guys as well is going to help. They had a very clear and obvious hole, and it was very hard for them to score. Defensively, they are unbelievable. I do think that KCP, while not the most dynamic scorer, is someone who can, fill up the buckets, so to speak. That's what the kids are saying, trust me. But he can go out there, get you some buckets, while also playing well defensively. And so of all the guys they could have gone out and got, obviously I think Paul George is probably the best. And so that didn't work. But in terms of how they fit into what they are doing and still addressing a need that they had, I think that he is one that helps them out in a very big way. At 4, it is the Houston Rockets. With all of the young kids that they have, and now another year with Van Vliet and with Brooks, and it all kind of meshing together, and Ime having another full year there to kind of do his thing as a coach, I feel like this is a team that takes a very big step this year. And so I think they are a little bit undervalued at 43.5. This one I'm taking a chance on. The Detroit Pistons at 25.5 points. I know one of the mantras of this show since it started back in 2021 has been feed off of the bad teams. So many times, honestly, a lot of the overvalued in any preseason market is just not assuming that this bad team is actually going to be that bad. And for a bit, we have been able to profit off of the ills of the Detroit Pistons. But that ends now, to a certain extent. I think Cade has a chance to be a breakout guy this year. I think that injuries and just the team's irrelevance have kind of made us forget how good this kid was in college and some of the great things that he can do. I think that they overpaid for some, but I do think that they have brought in some actual NBA talent, which I have heard helps. And so I think that maybe not a significant step. I don't think they're going to be playing meaningful games or anything like that. I just think that there is going to be a step forward for this group. And yes, I just said that there is going to be incentive to tank for teams this year. I think Detroit wants to be out of that now. I think that they kind of want to see what these young kids have and take those steps. And I think there's going to be at least a little bit there this year. And so to get to 26, 27 wins doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility for Detroit. At 2, the Dallas Mavericks. They won 50 games last year. Their total is at 49.5. I think this is a better team. I think Clay fits exactly what they need perfectly. And I think what they need fits what Clay can do now perfectly. He doesn't need to go out and be super dynamic offensive dynamo. They kind of just needed him to go out there, spot up, and hit some threes at times. Because that was something that was greatly lacking on this team last year. I have concerns about them defensively, but I think a full year with Washington and with Gafford on this team, and another year of Lively and all of those guys kind of developing and meshing together, added that with Klay Thompson in the corner, jacking and knocking down threes, I think that this is going to be a very, very dangerous team. And so Toxic asking, what do you think Klay can provide at this point in his career? I think we kind of get him into this is now his Ray Allen era, right? With the Miami Heat, where you used to be a top like 1 or 2, sometimes 3 on very, very good teams. Now, if you could kind of just be our 4th or 5th best player, but our best shooter, and someone that teams at least have to worry about, so that not 5 people can collapse on Luka when he starts to drive. Just be that drive and kick corner 3 option. That's all he needs to be, and I think that's kind of all he can be. I still think he is a very good shooter. That doesn't just go away. And so I think with less responsibility on this team, that's going to be a role that I think fits him perfectly. There's absolutely a world where he's just cooked, and I'm wrong on this. But I do think that he is a guy that can transition into this new role in his career really well. And I think it was difficult for him in Golden State because it's all there, right? Like you see like the banners up there. You see the spot where they're saving to retire your jersey someday. And so it's tough to just be like, no. I wasn't the guy, that was Steph. But I was one of the most important pieces on all of those championship teams. And this whole arena is built off of a lot of the hard work that I was able to do. And so it is tough to be in that same spot and transition into that new role. And so I think a fresh start in Dallas will allow him mentally to kind of get over some of those hurdles and be able to build up on that in a real important way. And so I do think he can provide quite a bit. At number 1, the Sacramento Kings at 44.5. I think DeMar makes this a more complete lineup. It makes scoring just so much easier. Not that they had a ton of trouble scoring offensively, but in the half court at times it could kind of bog down a little bit. And he is one of the best half court scoring players in the NBA. And I think one of the other things it lets them do is instead of it is now Sabonis and the bench, and it is now Fox and the bench, you can now have 2 of those 3 out there at any time. And it kind of lengthens the lineup and it makes you more dangerous for all 48 minutes of a basketball game. And so I think Sacramento, they had the big like the berm thingy a couple of years ago, and that was great. We all loved it. They took a bit of a step back last year. I think this is another step forward, probably even beyond what we saw from them a couple of years ago. I think Sacramento has a chance to really, really be a problem out west. Conrad asking, would you have retired Vince's numbers if you were in charge of the Raptors? Yes, I would. There's a video up on this now on youtube.com, again, /@CouchPotatoDiary. But yes, I would. I understand he quit on the team. And as a kid at the time, that was incredibly frustrating and very disappointing and core memory and all of those sorts of things. But when you look at what he did with the Raptors, and not even like, even if you just want to block out they would have folded if it wasn't for him thing, just from a play on the court standpoint, multiple-time All-Star, led this team to within 1 shot of the Eastern Conference Finals, was consistently one of the best players in the league for this team for an extended period of time. Even just that, I think you have to at least give consideration to retiring his jersey. But then when you combine it to the importance of bringing all those eyeballs in and making basketball cool in a hockey mad country during hockey season, all of those things combined, I think it's a no-brainer. And yes, it would have worked out perfectly timing-wise if you could have retired Kyle Lowry's jersey first and then Vince Carter's. But I don't think, with Vince going into the Hall of Fame this year, I don't think you can let the New Jersey Nets be the only ones who celebrate Vince Carter in that way, given how important he was to your franchise. And yes, set them back years and years and years with how he handled his exit from Toronto. A, we've become a little bit more accustomed to that now in the NBA. But B, I just think that the timing of it all with him going into the Hall of Fame really does kind of win out in this spot. And so, yeah, make it make it a situation where Vince is the first one up there, and then the second Lowry retires, his jersey is up there. He signs a one-day contract with the Raptors, and the jersey goes up in the rafters. And if you want a way to honor Kyle Lowry first, have Lowry be the first statue that the Raptors build outside of, I almost called it the Air Canada Center, whatever, it's a Scotiabank thing. Have the Lowry statue be the first one out there, and then you can put a Vince one wherever you want after. But that is, I think, how you can kind of make there be balance in the force again, is to have Lowry get the jersey retired second, but the statue first. All right, the NBA season. Coming up, man. Training camp's getting going. The podcast is starting to load up again. We're getting real excited about the start of the year. We even, and this is going to play in here a little bit more, we even have our first Kawhi injury update of the season. And again, you can see behind me with the thing there. I get thrown off. But there, that guy. We love Kawhi around these parts. But also, who didn't see that coming, right? So, we know the season now is in full gear with that injury issue. So today, looking at the coaches who are on the hot seat in the NBA. Coming in at 5, it is Taylor Jenkins out in Memphis. Last year was the last couple of years have been difficult to maneuver out in Memphis. And now everything is supposed to be coming together, right? They traded for Marcus Smart. You have John Morant. He is coming back and fully healthy and ready to go. You draft a very large Canadian, and all of a sudden that this team has the expectation that they are going to go out and really contend in the West. And while I do believe that is a thing that's going to happen, if it doesn't, probably going to fall on the coach. Right? And so now this is the year where it has to get going. And so if they start at like 22 and 27 or something like that, and it's not going, I think there's a very real opportunity that's like, all right, well, that guy, you're out of here. Let's see if we can get a spark and get this thing rolling. And so I think the pressure that is on Memphis kind of falls on him. Same thing for our next one, Willie Green for the New Orleans Pelicans. There's obviously some built-in excuses. The Brandon Ingram situation is just awkward. The Zion Williams situation is ever fluid, given the injury situation that he constantly has. But when he is on, still one of the most dominant pieces in the National Basketball Association ever. And so there is, I think, obviously cause for concern and a few outs, but also a lot of reason to be optimistic about this team. And they make a big trade to go out and get Murray. And so when you do that, it is, and you have a young superstar, it is now time to go. It is no longer, we battled really hard. First round of the playoffs, but we ran into Oklahoma City. What are you going to do? No more of that. This is now a team that needs to really get going here in the West. And if they don't, I think it probably falls on the coach. At 3, Mike Brown in Sacramento. Part of this is Sacramento is a very poorly run franchise. And while I do think that if this thing goes sideways this year, blaming the coach probably wouldn't be accurate. But I do also think that Sacramento kind of does that. But again, they have now had the surprise everyone year. They have had the, we kind of came back down to earth, but we are still a pretty good team. Now we sign a superstar adjacent player, at least in DeMar DeRozan. This is supposed to fix everything. If this next step isn't one forward, then this is now probably on the coach. And again, they're another team that if they are around 500 at some point, then it could just be curtains for Mike Brown. I'm not saying it should. I just think the situation in Sacramento kind of stacks up in a way that he may find himself on the hot seat. At 2, it's Tyronn Lue out with the Los Angeles, Chargers. It's Clippers. It's basketball. I think he's an excellent coach. I think he's a very, very good basketball coach. I also think he is in kind of a no-win situation. The Clippers are going into a brand new building, and boy, howdy, do they want it to look impressive, and do they want to be able to go out there and really make some noise, which is why it is very strange they let Paul George go in free agency. But they did. And now we are already hearing about some Kawhi Leonard injury issues. And so it already feels like too much is going to fall on the shoulders of James Harden this year. And that typically hasn't gone great for coaches. And so with all of the pressure that is on the Clippers this year, and given that they are locked into Kawhi now for 4 more years and kind of locked into this roster, if there is a reason for panic with the Clippers, it will probably fall on the shoulders of Ty Lue, and Bomber will just step right over him to the next guy. And at number 1, Billy Donovan out in Chicago. This was supposed to go better. They were also supposed to have Ball, who was supposed to help things out a little bit. But it has been awful for a few years now. And I do think that there has been a bit of a stay for Billy Donovan based off of the just horrendous roster construction that this team has had. But I do think this is going to be a very bad year for this team. And I do think at some point major changes are going to happen, and that's probably going to be in the coaching ranks as well. I don't see this season going well for this team, and I do think that they are going to try to reset it. I think that having Giddey as your primary ball guy just ain't gonna work. I think like the league entirely is telling you what they think of Levine. Vucevic, I think is intriguing, but it just none of the pieces really fit. And so I do think that before they really, not that I was going to say before they really blow it up. I think they're going to try to, but I do think that also it is going to be another coach who has to try to put all those pieces back together in Chicago. All right. The NBA world got shooketh over the weekend as the New York Knicks send Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle on their way to Minnesota in exchange for Karl Anthony Towns. And so, yes, this throws off a few NBA preview things that I do. We're still going to put out the mega preview on the eve of the NBA season, but there's going to have to be a couple disclaimers like, hey, this was recorded before that trade happened. And today was supposed to be NBA players on the hot seat, and 2 of them were Karl Anthony Towns and Julius Randle. So I suppose fitting that both players get moved in this particular deal. But let's start with the Knicks, because I like them more. They get the best player in this trade in Karl Anthony Towns. They needed a center with Mitchell Robinson being banged up and Hartenstein now being a Thunder. Boy, did they go out and get one. If this works, this can be a title team. I have said that. I've said that about this team before. Deeds, welcome back. Sorry that pesky work thing gets in the way. But happy to see you back. We still got some NHL talk coming up after the basketball here, and some Flames to close things out today. But I have said before that this is a New York Knicks team that is now a championship caliber roster. And you have now added Karl Anthony Towns to that. And so if he can properly integrate into this team, and the best version of him, I think, fits this team really well, where he doesn't need to be he's not a ball stopper. He doesn't need to, all right, now I got it, now I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to put it up. He can be a spot shooter and can kind of spread the floor a little bit. He provides them with a real big body presence down low that they didn't really have. Hartenstein and Robinson both at times were able to do that, but in terms of being like just a scorer down low, Towns is infinitely better than both of those guys. And so I think he can kind of fit with Brunson and Bridges in a very interesting way. On the defensive side, it's not perfect. He fouls a lot. And that is going to be the issue here, or one of the issues, I think, here, is defensively, when you are playing for Tom Thibodeau, a lot is expected of you. And you can't do that when you are onto the bench after you've fouled a lot. And that was always the frustration with this guy, is he can find himself in foul trouble for just the dumbest fouls you could possibly imagine. And so that is where you start to get into the oil and water aspect of this, because we had said before that the Knicks have carved out their identity. When you see a player out there, you're like, you know what? That's a Knick. Karl Anthony Towns is not that. And so you do lose a touch of that. But you also get a really interesting, very talented player at his peak. Like Game 7 against the Denver Nuggets, he had a monster game and helped them put the Nuggets away and move on to the Western Conference Finals. And so like there is a really, really good player in there. I do also think that it never really clicked in Minnesota, and I think that was kind of weighing on him a little bit. The fact that there was a new guy coming in to be the guy when he was the guy before, I don't think he ever really fully embraced that. Now he is coming to a team that isn't his team, but it's guys who he's familiar with from different aspects of life, right? So there is, I think, a really intriguing part of this team now that I'm excited to see it work. There is a part of me that is just a little bit like, oh, like I liked how they were constructed. I liked how they were put together, and I wanted to see it work. But now, offensively, this is going to be a difficult team to stop. We will see what they're able to do defensively. But I do think that he fits there a little bit well. On the Minnesota side, it gets you out of a gigantic contract. And DiVincenzo, I think, like, fits in with this Minnesota group quite well and what they are looking to do in kind of a second unit. He's still going to be a bench player on this team, but I think he fits this group very, very well. It's Randall that I'm not sure about, because Randall is that guy who, when he gets the ball, it all just kind of stops. And it's why it never really fit with him with the Knicks. Although, like, I'm saying it didn't really fit with him with the Knicks. Like, he's a two-time All-NBA and is a very good basketball player. And I think that gets lost in a few things sometimes. But with him and Edwards, like, Edwards needs the ball to be able to create and do all of those things. Well, so does Randall. And when Randall gets it, it's, okay, I'm going to back you down. I'm going to spin around. Oh, I'm a little point forward. Oh, and I'm going to shoot a three. And it's not going to work. And so, yeah, that... I have questions about the fit there, but like long-term contract-wise, I think it's an interesting move. It kind of gets them out of a couple of things, and now it is a big prove-it year for Julius Randle as well. So I don't think that this is a team now that takes a big step back. Towns, like, they replaced his minutes with Reed really effectively and didn't really miss a beat without him. So I think they just kind of slide him in there. We will see where Randall kind of fits with all of that, though, because I can't imagine Randall's going to be stoked to come off the bench in Minnesota after starting in New York. So it's gonna, again, it's an interesting fit out there. Overall, I do think the Knicks win this trade, because I do think Karl Anthony Towns just kind of raises the ceiling a little bit for this group offensively. It's a difficult fit defensively, but they have enough guys who can go out there and get stops defensively that I don't think it's going to be much of a hindrance. So I'm very excited to see how this all plays out, and to kind of recalibrate what I think of both conferences after a blockbuster trade. As we do these previews, everything I say that there is a conviction behind it, right? Like, oh yes, these are going to be these are the five most talented teams in the league. These are the coaches that could get fired this year. These are the players that have the most pressure on them. All these different things. And that is what we're supposed to do in sports talk, right? Is we are supposed to have our takes and stick with them, and the hotter the better, and all of those sorts of things. But I'm human enough to admit, sometimes there's some shit I'm worried I'm wrong about. And so today, as we kind of reach the halfway point of the NBA previews here, going to be looking at what I'm worried I'm wrong about this year with the NBA. So number 5, I am worried that I might be wrong on how everything fits with the Dallas Mavericks. We had this conversation a little bit about, Toxic was in on the chat asking about, like, how do we think Klay fits on this Dallas Mavericks team? And I think it fits really well. I think you have a full year with Gafford in Washington coming back from that trade. And I think you have Klay, who now is going into a role where he is not going to have to be the be-all, end-all superstar of this and be just be corner 3 guy over there. Just do that. And we will be more than happy. And then you have Luka with off of this championship, run close to a championship, hopefully motivated and all of that. I feel like these pieces fit so well together. But we have been fooled by that before with some of these teams, and with some veterans. Like there is a world where, like, Luka was just kind of beaten down by that long of a run and having to carry things, and maybe it isn't quite as good, and the supporting staff doesn't help out as much as maybe we think, and the fact that this team doesn't defend at all really comes back to bite them, and Klay is just cooked. Like, some of these things could happen, and all of a sudden my good feelings about Dallas could just go away, and so that's why I'm a little worried I'm wrong about them, but I'm at number 5 because I'm not super worried about that. And number 4, I'm a little worried I might be wrong about Atlanta just being bad. It wasn't a fit with Murray. So Trae Young now has the team back to himself. And I have great concerns about that. I have great concerns about the rest of the roster. And I do not think that this is a good basketball team. And so I will be able to, plausible deniability, the whole year, I'll be able to explain it away, much like Walt was with the Commanders earlier. It's like, yeah, who are they beating? Because the Eastern Conference in the NBA, is in a downswing right now. There's obviously some talented teams at the top, but it gets ugly quick. And so there are, I think, a number of wins out there for Atlanta to steal. And so we may not even get a good sense of if this is a good basketball team or not, based off of the lack of competition that there could be in the East. And so I am worried that the results are going to be there, even if the team is bad. Also, like, there's a chance that maybe now young matures coming off of this experience with Murray and grows into a better basketball player. Or with no Murray there, there's other opportunities for some of these players to rise up and take full advantage, or something. Either way, I am a little bit worried that I think Atlanta may be better than I think they are. But again, that's at 4. At 3, the Rockets' young players development, and that is going to be a theme for a couple of these next ones here, is that one of the lessons we took from last year is that some of these kids coming into this league now are so good that when it hits, it really hits. And so instead of bad lottery team gets good player helps bad lottery team, but only a little bit. And now, they've gone from 22 wins now to 30. And now they've gone up to 39. And now they're a bit above 500 and they're a 7 seed. And now they're competing for an NBA championship. Minnesota skipped a couple of those steps with Ant, right? SGA helped Oklahoma City skip a couple of those steps. And so I am now thinking that the Rockets players can help these guys step, because there's like 3 or 4 of them on that team that you think might be able to take those steps. But that is entirely projection based, right? Like the first 2 in the worried I'm wrong about, Dallas, I'm worried that they might not still be a good team. Well, last time we saw them, they were a good team. Atlanta, I'm worried that I might be wrong, that I think they're bad. Well, last time we saw them, they were a bad team. This one, we are now projecting into how these young athletes adapt to life in the NBA and how does it fit with Fred VanVleet and with Udoka as the coach and all of that. So I'm a little worried that I might be going a bit ahead of myself on the Rockets. Number 2, the Bridges and now Towns fit on the Knicks. Admittedly, when I prepped this, that was not the Towns part of this was not an option. He could not fit well on this team because he wasn't on this team. But now I still look at this as a really well-built roster and a team that just kind of fits perfectly together. And so I am worried that I am wrong on that you have Towns, who came from being the guy in Minnesota and now potentially being the 3rd guy on the Knicks with a coach who he didn't really mesh with the first time, and a team that isn't going to give him the ball a ton. You go with Bridges from a situation with the Nets where who else was going to get the ball and score? So he was able to do all of these great things. And then you have Brunson, who is actually the guy there and is someone who has stepped up in gigantic ways. I think all of it will fit, but there is a long track record of A, this not working, and B, it not working in New York, where every time we think, okay, well, yeah, it's Amari and Melo, how can they go wrong? Oh, that's how they can go wrong. I see it now. But it does feel like this team is built really well. I do worry that it's going to take too long to mix, or it's just not going to mix at all, and things could fall off. So that's one thing I'm worried about. But the number one thing I am worried about this year is my assumption that Wemby moves into MVP caliber territory already, and thusly carries the Spurs into the postseason. They are the number 1 team I am focused on for making a big jump this year, and it is entirely based off of that very large Frenchman that is on their team. And they went out and acquired Chris Paul. I think they've done a lot of really, really smart moves to build around this kid. It is not perfect yet, though. And so that is where my concern comes in, is that I just think Wemby's going to be amazing. And he can get hurt. We had 1 year where he didn't, so now we're assuming that he's never going to. And that absolutely could happen, and it would suck. But he could get hurt, and it would be very devastating for this team. Or even if he takes a gigantic step, he still isn't enough to carry what is, aside from like Chris Paul and a couple of other guys, a fairly flawed roster. So I am worried that I am maybe wildly overestimating what could happen with the San Antonio Spurs this year. The NBA season is right around the corner, and some teams are going to be feeling the heat, so to speak, with all of that. So here are the top 5 teams that are under the most pressure in the NBA this season. Coming in at number 5, it is the New York Knicks. When you are the Knicks and you are good, there is always pressure. When you are the Knicks and you had a seemingly promising playoff run last year, there's a ton of pressure. When it was cut short from injuries and you bring some of the key pieces back, even more, and then you make the two biggest trades of the offseason, it's going to pile up. The reason I only have them at 5 is because I still think there is the slightest bit of a honeymoon with this group this season. Now, if this year doesn't end with honestly probably 2 playoff series wins, then this team rockets to number 1 next year. The pressure is going to build very, very quickly in New York, but I still think there is a bit of a honeymoon with how good this team is and kind of how out of nowhere that came. So I don't think all of that pressure is there, but there is still quite a bit on them. At 4, it's Miami. The expectations in Miami aren't as high as they are with the Knicks. But I do think that with Jimmy Butler's contract coming up and with like everyone was like heat culture, heat culture, heat culture. Well, since that finals, they haven't done a whole lot. And I think there is now a little bit of pressure on this team to try to stay relevant because if this season doesn't go well, I think that it could be a little bit, and I know Miami doesn't rebuild. They never do. And they somehow always, they get Dwayne Wade and off they go. And they get a Bam Adebayo and look at that. And they trade for a Jimmy Butler and off they go. But I do think that if this year doesn't go well, we could see just the slightest step back for the Miami Heat. At 3, it's the Phoenix Suns. I think that they have kind of escaped some of the headlines since the postseason, but now, once this season ramps up, it's going to be like, oh yeah, they did spend a whole lot of money on this team to go nowhere and to get just spanked in the first round of the playoffs. There aren't the, oh, well, they're new, it's whatever. This is now, no. You have 2 of the most talented players in the league. They played together all year. I get, like, Beal was there too. But this has to start working in Phoenix. They are paying way too much money to get just annihilated in the first round. Speaking of which, at 2, it's the LA Clippers. They are spending a ton of money. They are going into a new arena. Everything now, from the offseason where they signed that guy, Kawhi Leonard, for those who are listening, and they made this push knowing that the new arena was coming in 2024, 2025. Everything was building up to this moment. And so far, hasn't worked. They had one good playoff run, and otherwise it has been a whole lot of frustration. And they are still spending mucho dinero on this team, except they let one guy walk. And so now you are entering this new arena with Kawhi Leonard, who may walk on a court at some point this year. James Harden, and basically no other backup plan. So I think from NBA circles, there isn't a whole lot of pressure on him because there's just not a whole lot of expectations. But given what this buildup was supposed to be and what this year was supposed to mean for this team in kind of branching out on their own and moving out of mom's basement as the Clippers at Staples before and now crypto dot whatever, they need this year to go well, and no one thinks it's going to. And if it doesn't, I don't know what happens. But it probably nothing good with the LA Clippers. And at number 1, it is the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid has won MVPs. You have a team that has won a ton of regular season games, but the playoff success hasn't been there. They then won the offseason. Now they need to win playoff series. This isn't good. It's not good enough to beat the Raptors or to beat the whoever's in the first round of the playoffs. You need to go out and you need to actually win these series. And if they don't, I think Joel Embiid has escaped a lot of criticism because he's really good, right? But playoffs, it hasn't been good. And that, everyone's numbers take a dip in the playoffs. You are facing tougher competition. That's what it's going to be. But every year there has been an excuse. It's, oh, well, Ben Simmons. Oh, well, it didn't give me enough support, which is, I do think, something you can poke some holes in a little bit. Someone commented that on one of the best players in the league videos that we did. And I think we're overstating that a touch because, you've had, they went out and they got James Harden. They had Jimmy Butler. They had to, their starting 5 when they lost to the Raptors was actually quite good. And now you've gone out and got Paul George. Even if you want to use they didn't really get him anyone. Well, now they do. Maxey looks like a superstar, and you brought in Paul George. So now you have a super team here that you need to do it. So that excuse is gone. He's saying that we're going to be committed to a championship, so we're probably going to be load managing this cat a little bit more. There are no more excuses for Joel Embiid. I do not see a player or a team that is under more pressure this year to succeed than the Philadelphia 76ers, because if this doesn't work, you guys know I'm not a big blow it up guy, and I don't even think you should out in Philadelphia, but you're kind of running out of different cards to try to pull to try to make this thing work. So the Philadelphia 76ers are the team that is facing the highest expectations in the NBA this season. The NBA season preview rolls on. Today, looking at teams that have a chance to go from worst to first in the association this year. And I should kind of clarify on this one. The original premise for this segment is from the NFL season preview. And the NFL has 8 divisions. So you have 8 opportunities to go from worst to first in the NFL. And so that gets a little bit easier to do that. In the NBA, you only have 4 divisions. And honestly, in the NBA, I think you could ask some pretty advanced basketball fans, hey, who's in what division? Break them down for me. And you would have some trouble doing that, as division wins have meant less and less as the years have kind of gone on in the association. But I do think that there is, at least some importance of that. And so for this particular segment, it is titled worst to first, but it is the worst 2 to first in your division. If you were in the bottom 2 in your division last year and have a chance to move up, then you qualify for this list. So coming in at number 5, it's the Detroit Pistons. It would take quite a bit for them to jump up in the, Central, I think, division. And yes, like they would have a steep hill to climb and a lot would have to go right, which is why they're at 5, because it does seem almost illogical to assume that it could happen. But let's go through the scenario. What we have to assume with this is that Detroit gets better. And that's one of the things I've talked about, is that I think Cade Cunningham finally is able to take his jump this year. They were able to put him with some really good. That would be an overstatement. But with some actual NBA talent, which seems like a low bar to clear for an NBA team, but is not something he has had at his disposal a whole lot. So I think that there is a chance, and it's one of the things we talked about from the lessons we learned last year, that there is a chance for this young kid to really take that step and help Detroit advance a couple steps beyond what we would think. Then a lot has to go right for them. You don't need to squint too hard to see them being better than Chicago. We can put that one behind us. After that, the rest of the Central is Milwaukee, Indiana, and Cleveland. So, bit of a murderer's row type. And so for Detroit to get that worst to first, again, everything has to go well for them. Milwaukee has to have a bit of a season from hell sort of a thing. And the 3 teams really would. But you can see, like, any of Giannis, Middleton, Lillard get injured, and all 3 of those are realistic scenarios. Like, if we're in January and all of a sudden Brook Lopez is the best player on the floor for the Milwaukee Bucks, like that would suck, but wouldn't be overly like, oh wow, no, all of these prime athletes, how could they? Middleton has had injury problems before. Giannis starting to get a little bit more banged up as the years go on, and Lillard, I don't think Lillard really falls into a worried about getting injured status, but again, getting a little bit older and a lot of wear and tear and whatnot. So you would have to have like a bunch of injuries on this team, but we already saw that can happen. For Indiana, it would kind of have to be everyone's figured us out. Like, they don't defend worth a lick. And the offensive explosion was fun last year, but they could be a bit of a target for, or a bit of a candidate for, well, the league got the tape and had a full offseason get ready for us, and now we can't do half of the shit that we were doing before, and oh no, look at this, now we've just completely fallen off. And then for Cleveland, I think that it would be a bit of an inner turmoil thing where the Garland and Mitchell situation just is not tenable at all, and Mobley has not taken the steps forward that they needed him to, and it isn't working. To steal the AEW phrase, the conglomeration of talent that they have just doesn't click. And we have seen at times, like there was one injury last year, and all of a sudden Cleveland got a whole lot better. So you would need all of that to happen for the Pistons to make that jump. but I still think that they have the talent to maybe advance that level. Coming in at number 4 on this list, it is the Golden State Warriors. They are in the Pacific Division, and right now, it just kind of looks wide open. And they did finish in the bottom 2 in this division last year, but I think not every team, though. I was going to say, I feel like almost every team in this at least made the play-in, but for the Warriors, yes, there's no Clay, but it would... I don't think you have to squint to see what would happen or what would need to happen for this team to get back to an elite level. Steph Curry stays awesome. Andrew Wiggins, find whatever he has lost over the last couple of years, and Kuminga, Moody, and Podziemski continue the progression of young basketball players. Or they trade all of them and get someone super awesome, and they just skyrocket. But I do think that there is an available option for them to be better than the Suns, Kings, Clippers, and Lakers this season. At 3, it's San Antonio. I have been telling you guys that I am all in on the Wemby San Antonio Spurs experience, and that was one of the things I'm worried I'm wrong about in the episode that we did there, but this is a team that I think has the capabilities, given that they put a real point guard with Wemby, and given another year of experience, the Olympic scenario with for Wembanyama. And so I think that, again, you can see a very real world where they are better than the Grizzlies, the Pelicans, the Rockets, and the Mavericks. At 2, it's Sacramento. They go out and get DeMar DeRozan, and I love this move for them. They had at times, like, I think DeMar is one of the best, like, half-court mid-range scorers in the NBA in the last, 20 years. There's obviously a couple of guys ahead of him, that guy. Kawhi, for those listening. And, LeBron, very good. Kevin Durant. Those guys. The guys who are just, pure scorer types anyway. But DeMar DeRozan is so good in that, in creating his shots and getting... just using his high basketball IQ and obvious offensive gifts as well to get into some very good spots to score the basketball. And so I think that will help this team if things can kind of bog down on them a little bit. But the thing that I also think that it helps is that there are a lot of times where it'd be, okay, it's Sabonis in the bench, and now it's Fox in the bench, and now it's Sabonis and Fox, and it's just, you have very little time where it was the two of them together. And now with DeMar, you can basically have two very good offensive players out there at one time in DeMar, Sabonis, and Fox, and just kind of keep rotating the two, between two of them all game. And that is really difficult to stop from a defensive standpoint. So I think that they have a chance to just be very difficult to play against for 48 minutes and be a very good offensive team. And so again, we went over the Pacific. The division feels wide open with the Suns, Warriors, Kings, Clippers, and the Lakers. And at number 1, now this one, I made this list a bit before and probably could have adjusted it, but we're going down with the ship. Made this before we saw John Morant hobble off the floor twice in a preseason game, but it's the Memphis Grizzlies. If John Morant is healthy, I think they nailed it in the draft with Edey. This is still a really, really talented basketball team when everyone is healthy, and they had a year from hell year last year. If they can keep everyone on the floor, then I think this team, honestly, kind of cruises to a Southwest Division title after a really bad year last year. We've talked up the Spurs, but there's a reason the Spurs are behind Memphis on this list. I think that Memphis at their peak is quite a bit better, actually, than San Antonio. And then you only kind of need Dallas to take a bit of a slip. And this team is right there to win this division. So I think it is wide open for Memphis to go from worst to first. Earlier this offseason, we did coaches on the hot seat. Today, it is players on the hot seat. And this one can mean different things at different times. But for the most part, it is players who are facing pressure for either trades or just potentially leaving their team or whatever it may be. So, it's going to mean different things for different players as this list goes along. So coming in at number 5, it is Kevin Durant. It already kind of sounded like he was on the block anyway. There was at least a couple of moments in the offseason where it was, well, they could package these picks together and go get this guy. They could package it and da-da-da-da. And for the Phoenix Suns, this year, there's a lot of pressure on them. We talked about them. They made the list for teams facing the most pressure this upcoming season. When you are spending the amount that they are spending, and you have these three guys at the top of your roster, there are going to be high expectations. And quite frankly, last year, they came up extremely short of those. And so if this is another year where it is starting to kind of not go that way, or not go their way, excuse me. I think that Phoenix could make a move and try to recoup some of the stuff that they gave up in a Kevin Durant deal. And there are a lot of teams who are looking pretty good, who have some draft picks to move, who might fancy themselves one Kevin Durant away from being a title contender. And so I think that if Durant and the Suns don't get off to a very good start this year, I think there could be Kevin Durant on the move. For this next one, it's not so much that I think he would get traded, but this is more a perception thing. I think if this year doesn't go well for Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks, that I don't know if Young gets moved out of Atlanta, but I do think he gets moved down a tier or two in conversations. I think we have kind of run out of patience in the Trae Young game. When we tried bringing in DeJounte Murray, it never worked. It never came close to working. And so there was that blip there where they made it to the conference finals, and there was a lot going on against Philadelphia that led them to that point. But since then, it hasn't looked remotely close to what we saw from that team. And this year now, there isn't there's just this other guy who needs the ball, as my cat jumps in. There isn't this other guy who's chiming in and taking a lot of the spotlight or whatever. I'm forcing that metaphor because there's a cat jumped on me for those who are listening. But I think that for Trae Young now, that this is, and it was before, but it is so clearly his team now, that if it is another year of mediocrity out in Atlanta and for Trae Young, and it is another year where he is getting his stats, but the team is not playing winning basketball, then I think he kind of moves down a tier or two in a lot of the discussions about NBA players. At 3, we already talked about him, if you're listening to the full episode, in players who will decide the season, but it's Jimmy Butler. When Pat Riley comes out and calls out your contract situation in the offseason, there's a pretty good chance that the seat that you're sitting on is a little bit toasty. And so I think that, pardon the Miami Heat pun there, but I do think that if Jimmy Butler wants to stay in Miami, then he and this team have to get off to a very good start. I think there was a lot of frustration with Jimmy Butler talking some smack when he was hurt last year, and just with how everything ended in Miami. And we know Pat Riley, a little bit cutthroat, a little bit ruthless when it comes to those sorts of decisions. So I think the pressure is on Jimmy Butler to come up with a big time year. At 2, Darius Garland. It seems like for now, the situation has settled out in Cleveland, but we saw last year, Garland got hurt and this team did well. And now you have Donovan Mitchell signing a contract extension, and we know in the NBA that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to stay there the whole time. But it at least, I think, moves him down the list of people who might get moved. And it puts Garland right at the top. And so if this 4-man unit of Allen, Mobley, Garland, and Mitchell is going to work, it kind of has to work now. They have, I think, again, run out of runway for this to be a thing. And I think that this is going to be a year where there's going to be pressure on him to go out and get the job done. And at number 1, it's Brandon Ingram. This one's tricky because it feels like if they could have moved him, they would have by now. But it's a weird contract situation because no one disagrees that Brandon Ingram is a talented player and probably, honestly, from a talent standpoint, a max level player. But he also doesn't really seem like a guy who, if you give him the max, he's going to elevate people around him and you're going to be fine. Like, he feels like the max on a bad team, which is it's weird. So I think there is pressure on him to go out and show that he can mix his talents. Sorry, it sounded like someone was inside, but they're yelling from outside. That he can mix his talents and be very, very good and also be a part of a winning basketball team. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Brandon Ingram to show all of that this year. So, the NBA season is very, very close, and that means that our season preview is continuing. Today, we are going to look at the players who will decide the NBA this season. And this is different from the players who, like, the best players in the league and all of that. These are the guys who, if they come out and really do what they do or do what they're supposed to do or whatever it is, then that is going to shift potential like championships, conferences, whatever, that they are going to have an impact. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do or something happens, then it shifts the dynamic in a complete other way. So, coming in at number 5, I'm cheating, but it's 2 guys on one team. It is Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier. The Miami Heat have not really done a whole lot since Heat culture reigned supreme a couple of years ago. And now you have Pat Riley talking about Jimmy Butler contracts, and it just feels like the end of an era could be coming soon for the Miami Heat. Maybe that's a bit overstating things, but I think there is a lot of pressure on Jimmy Butler this year, and thus Terry Rozier as well. You had Rozier, Butler, and Adebayo, and they never really got going together, and injuries kind of kept that group apart for a bit. But I do think now, when you go into this season, if that is still the case, and there is ineffectiveness, injuries, and all of those things, then Miami probably just kind of fades off into that night. And then that leads to a couple of things. 1, I think Jimmy Butler gets traded. 2, Rozier gets traded? I don't think he would get moved necessarily, but I do think that it would be a change in philosophy in Miami a little bit. I don't think that they don't do the teardown thing. They never have and probably won't. But what they might do a retool or something, but I do think it would lead to a pretty big shift for them and then lead to a good player being out on the market. And if those guys do click, they are a team that no one is talking about right now in the Eastern Conference. And so that would put some pressure on those top tier teams. So that's why I think those 2 guys are going to be really important in deciding how this year goes. At 4, it's Chris Middleton. The Milwaukee Bucks are the forgotten team, I think, in the NBA. And your time has, your time, you had your time, it has now come and gone. On to the next thing. And everyone's kind of forgetting that this has the potential to be a very good basketball team with Lillard, Giannis, and Middleton. And if Middleton can get back to what we have seen him do in the past, then this Milwaukee Bucks team, I think, still has a championship level ceiling. It might be one that they can just kind of only graze right now, but it is one where if they do have everyone healthy and playing the way that they can still get to that level. But Middleton, I think, is the absolute key for that. And so if Middleton is going, again, Milwaukee can be a championship contender, and that puts more pressure on the Bostons and the Philadelphias and the New Yorks in the Eastern Conference. If Middleton isn't right, then I think that this becomes a much less dynamic offensive team, and they kind of just, again, fade away, like we talked about with with Miami, and they do kind of become the afterthought that everyone thought they were going to be. At 3, Zion Williamson. We got so many, we've been getting little tastes of Zion in different play-ins and stuff like that, but we saw last year that he can go on a run and be that MVP caliber player that we all thought he could be, and we thought injuries maybe denied us of that, but there is still that guy in there. It is asking a lot, but if that guy's in there for 82 games, then this Pelicans team, again, I think could be a championship contender. There's a lot of ifs that go along with that, no question, but I think that if Zion Williamson is healthy and can, for 82 games, just one 82 game stretch is all we need from this guy. Honestly, probably 65 games, or maybe even 60. Can we just keep this guy healthy so that they can get into the playoffs? But again, this is a team that I don't think a whole lot of people in the West or a whole lot of people just in general, are really factoring into the West discussion. It is the Minnesotas and the Denvers, and even Memphis, I think, is getting a little bit more buzz than this team is right now. And so there's a weird Ingram thing going on there totally, and we'll talk about him a little bit later on in this episode. But for Zion, if he can get to that level, then again a new contender comes into the ring in the championship discussion in the Western Conference. At 2, Jamal Murray. It was a disaster of an Olympics for him, and it's not been great in Denver since they won the championship. And I get that was only a couple of years ago, but like I guess I said it hasn't been great in Denver since then. Like they were very good team and on the cusp of being the number 1 seed in the West last year. So I'm overstating that a little bit. But for Murray, they have someone who I think really needs to get going, because if he is not, they just don't have the horses anymore. And it kind of all came together in that championship run where he was going, and you had depth and a bench that can help push you. And then Jokic is obviously the best player in the world. But now you have taken some significant hits to your depth, and you are now relying on a lot of pieces that are just unproven. You cannot have this guy not be at a all-star level. If he is at that level, then again, the Nuggets can win a title. If he is not, it is going to be really hard for this team to get back to that championship point. And so for the other ones that we talked about in this list so far, it's yeah, you know what, you can squint and see that, man, they could really make a push for something. With Denver, we obviously have a proof of concept a couple of years ago, and they have the best player in the world. If Murray can just be himself, then this is a championship caliber team again. But if he is not, then I just don't think they can compete with the Oklahoma Cities and all the teams we mentioned before, right? So he is, I think, so important to deciding how this season goes for Denver and for the rest of the NBA. And at 1, it is Isaiah Hartenstein. He comes to a Oklahoma City Thunder team that feels like they were a Isaiah Hartenstein away from being a championship team a year ago. And it certainly seems like he just fits there in Oklahoma City. And if it is the perfect match that everyone thinks it is going to be, then yes, this is, I think, the clear favorites in the West, and would give a real scare to the Celtics or the Knicks or the 76ers or whoever in the NBA championship, in the NBA finals. If he is not, if for whatever reason it's just an oil water thing or whatever it is, if he's not, then I think the door in the West is wide open, given, again, what we talked about with Denver, what we talked about with the Pelicans, what we have talked about in the past about the Minnesota Timberwolves. And so I just think, obviously, that this is a superstar-driven league. We all have that understanding. But the superstar play on the Thunder wasn't an issue last year. It was just getting those rebounds and getting those stops, or some of those stops, I guess, at key moments, and being able to rely on a big man to do some of those things. They need him now. If he can be that guy, then this can be that team. If he can't, then it feels like it's going to be just another one, just another good team in the West. So those are the players who I think will decide this upcoming season. It is NBA preview time. First, we're going to run through the Eastern Conference and do the win picks for each of them. And then it will be on to the Western Conference, running through and doing the win total plays for each of them. So I do have my handy notebook here. I don't have a lot of room for it, so just quickly doing this. And now we are back. Okay, so NBA. Eastern Conference. It's funny. I'm going to break these up by division. God, I don't even know if I should be doing that. But I think it'd be good to break them up by division, just because, there are a couple division props that you might want to look at if you are going to do that. Again, none of this is to be construed as gambling advice. This is all just what I think will happen and just picks. This isn't I think you should do it or anything like that. This is just where I kind of come down on all of this. Wow, ESPN doesn't even break their thing up. Is there even an option to break this up by division? There isn't. That's crazy. Okay, moving on. Well, let's just begin. And I will find the divisions at some point here, because honestly, divisions mean so little in the NBA. I don't even know who's in each division anymore. But we still have an opportunity to get, division picks and division odds and stuff like that. So there we go. All right, in the Atlantic Division, the Atlanta Hawks coming in, their total sits at 35.5. They were one of the teams that I put as an overvalued team this year. I just think that this is done. I know that they made the trade, DeJounte Murray. They got a couple of decent guys back. They had the first overall pick. Reece Shea is there. Trae Young, all of it. This is a chance for Trae Young to prove me wrong, and to go out and really show that he can be that superstar who can lead teams to victories and lead teams to championships and all of that. But I just don't think he is that guy. I think he would be a much better number 2 on a team. I think he'd be a much better number 3 on a team. I don't think he is a number 1. I don't see it with this group. I really, really don't. So I am going under 35.5, and that is going to be one that we lock in this year. For the Boston Celtics, they were also on one of my overvalued teams for the upcoming year. And this is not a comment on the talent. I think that this is still going to be a team that is going out and dominating and competing for championships and all of that. I do think, though, the total at 58.5 is really high. They got around that last year, and they basically bring back the same team. But Kristaps Porzingis is going to be banged up. He's not coming back until the calendar flips to 2025. I know this because I have him in fantasy. But I think that being that way, and this team coming off of playing a lot of basketball, going to NBA Finals for a couple of years, and now going out winning that championship. And while not all of them really played a ton in the Olympics. A couple of them still at least made the trek over and interrupted their offseason a little bit. And so I just think from a regular season standpoint, it's going to be tough for this team to get all of those wins. I still, again, don't think that they're going to be bad. I don't think that this is going to be a falling off or anything like that. I think they are going to be there at the end and all of those things. I just don't view them as a regular season dominant team at this point. The Brooklyn Nets, they are at 19.5 right now. It is just such a low number. I almost have to go over because that is so low. Counterpoint, this team is so bad. Cam Thomas is their number 1 option. They got a bunch of picks for Mikal Bridges, but there wasn't anything coming back that was going to help this team out. There's nothing there for this team to think they're going to be good. And so I just can't in all good conscience say anything good about this basketball team. I am going to go again under 19.5 on Brooklyn. That's not going to be one we lock in, but they are so bad that it would pain me to take the over. And I get that is not a sharp way of thinking, but could this be a team that gets 17 wins this year? Definitely. I think they're closer to that than they are a team that wins 22. Like, I think if I was going to take the over, I probably wouldn't. You're only taking it for a couple of games. Well, under, they could go by a few. Toxic. I know hindsight is 2020, but what a horrible trade Luka for Trae Young is. Holy cow. You're not wrong there, Toxic. You are not wrong. That is looking like an all-timer. I do think that Sacramento and Phoenix get a little bit of because they didn't just directly trade him away, I don't think get nearly criticized enough for how awful it was that they had 2 picks there as well, and they didn't take Luka with either of those picks. Like, it was Ayton went first overall, right? And then Sacramento, I think it was Fox, who fine player. Ayton helped Phoenix in a NBA Finals. But how's that helping now? It's not. And Luka would obviously be the best player of that draft. He would be the best player of most drafts. And so for those teams to have passed up on Luka Doncic is, in fact, certifiably insane. And so, yes, that is one of the all-time, I think, draft blunders in NBA history, really. Moving on, the Charlotte Hornets. Sorry. They play more like the Bobcats. Their total is at 29.5, and they were another one that we had as overvalued coming into this season. I don't see it at all. You get Ball back, that's great. Miller seemed to have a pretty good year. What else? Oh my God, you're right. It was. It was Marvin Bagley. Holy hell, that's even worse. Completely forgot about that. That's my bad for missing on that one. Trying to go off of memory and just giving Sacramento the benefit of the doubt on that. No, you're right. It was Bagley. Holy shit, that's an awful pick. But yes, back to Charlotte. I don't see anything with this team. I don't know where the better is coming from with this group, and I just think they are remarkably untalented. So they get an under at 29.5 for me. For the Bulls at 27.5. It's an under. A lot of unders in this thing to start out. You know what? I thought they had this broken up by division. They didn't. That is completely my bad. I had Atlanta and Boston are in the same division. They're not. That was horrendous of me. So going to have to again kind of track this on the fly. None of this I don't think affects any of you. I was breaking it down wrong. I was like, I don't think I have this right by division, and I don't. They have it in alphabetical order on NBA.com, and they had a line in the middle. I was like, oh yeah, these are the two divisions, because my brain went to hockey. And it's not. It's three divisions in each conference. And again, none of them matter, but I think from a looking at value standpoint and looking at a couple of different plays you could make, I think that it's good to know where these teams stack up, because you can still get some division odds and things of that nature. So, brief interruption there, because I feel like I'm getting this wrong. There's no way Boston and Chicago are in the same division, and they're not. But Chicago at under 27.5. It's a bad basketball team. Again, like there's just it's not the most in-depth analysis. I get it. It's just a not talented group. They are so bad. Ball coming back for the first time since 2022 would be awesome and really sweet. And I think him being out really did affect things greatly with how they wanted to construct this team, but it shouldn't have sent you in the tailspin that it did. I think no DeMar DeRozan, they are going to realize how much more difficult scoring the basketball is without DeMar there to bail out this offense. And I think that there is the potential for trades. There's the potential for just guys giving up. This just has all the makings of being just a horrendous basketball year for them this year. I think it's going to be a disaster. I think that there is a chance they get bailed out and get the number 1 overall pick. Maybe Giddey comes in and lights the world on fire. I don't see it, and I think Caruso being gone hurts a bit of identity for this team as well. So it is such an easy under for me at 27.5. That one is going to be one that we circle as well. So it's a lot of unders to start. Some of those wins got to go somewhere, and they go to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Also, just a quick note. It's interesting how things can shift so quickly, and just how, Cleveland, they got to trade everybody. He's not going to want to stay. They're going to blow it up. It's going to be whatever. And now it comes back and it's basically the same team. And I don't know if I view that as a positive or a negative necessarily. But for Cleveland, I do think that the regular season, they're going to be fine. I think their issues show up in the postseason, but I think regular season, this is a 50-win team. And we saw last year, even if they don't stay healthy, this is a 50-win team. Because of the different moving parts that they have and the different depth that they have built up. The big key here, and not doing difference makers this year, just ran out of time for that. But if we were doing an X factor, it's Mobley. If he can find that shooting range that everyone thought he was going to have coming out of college, then this actually becomes one of the scarier teams in the league because they can defend and they got guys who can score. The spacing has been a bit of an issue with this whole thing. And if Mobley can develop that long-range shot, then it just opens up a world of possibilities with this team. And I am not banking my hopes on that actually happening. I do think that this will still be a good basketball team, though. And so I do like Cleveland over 47.5. The Detroit Pistons, they were one of my undervalued teams this year, and so I am going over 25.5. I think they went out and acquired some actual real-life NBA players, which I think will help. And one of the things that we talked about for the theme of the year, what we saw last year, is that we are now at a point with the talent in the NBA where the young players take more than just one step at a time. And that's going to come up in the West as well. But with this team, I think Cade Cunningham is ready to have his breakout season. I think they have just enough around him that this team is going to take those steps. And so I think like that we're going to get down to it with the play-in teams and all of that. This is a conference that has 9 teams that feel like playoff teams. And so just one of them has to get into the play-in just based on how it needs to play out. I think they have a real opportunity to get up into that play-in round, so to speak. So no, I think Cade Cunningham really gets them going. This one is really tough. Indiana at 46.5. They had a fantastic season a year ago. They now have a full season with Pascal Siakam and everything that they can do with this group offensively. My one worry is that they don't defend for shit. And the whole everything's crazy on offense thing can catch teams off guard even for a season. But now that all these coaches have had a full off season to adjust, see what it looks like, okay, what should we do actually against? I think there could be a bit of a step back here with Indy. And so it's a lot of unders in the East. But I'm going to go under 46.5 on the Indiana Pacers. Not what I'm going to click on, but we're going to go under there. Miami, 44.5. This one was a stone cold under for me for a bit, and I think they were one of the teams that made the playoffs last year that might not this year. But it does really feel like Jimmy Butler has come in and been really motivated. Eric Spoelstra is still an amazing coach, and so I again find myself buying into Miami. What we said in terms of guys who are going to decide the season, if Rozier and Butler can stay healthy and actually gel, and you have Adebayo, Butler, and Rozier all playing really good basketball together, this is going to be a team that is going to be a difficult out. And so I am going to go over 44.5 for the Miami Heat. Milwaukee, 51.5. This is an easy under for me. I think their time has kind of come and gone. I think that you are relying on a full uninjured season for Damian Lillard, for Chris Middleton. You are banking on Brook Lopez just being awesome and ageless and being able to control things even as he gets into his late 30s as a big dude. Giannis is amazing, and he is one of the best players in the league still. But this just does not feel like a competitive team in the Eastern Conference anymore in terms of the upper echelon. And so for this team to get to 52 and 30 on the year, I simply don't see it. So they are an under to me at 51.5. The New York Knicks, their total is at 52.5. I'm taking it. I'm taking the over on it. I'm all in on this Knicks team. I loved what they were able to do last year. And we did kind of talk about some of the things that we're worried about, where you have a team that has built up an identity, and DiVincenzo was such a big part of that. And he is gone, and Towns doesn't seem like he fits it, and he's there. And so that there is the potential, that this just doesn't work with Bridges, who's used to getting all the touches in Brooklyn, Cat, who still views himself as a number one, and Brunson, who's actually the best player on this team, and again the only one basketball to go around thing. In its best form, it can win a championship. I do have a couple of concerns about it, but we know they can defend. We know that they can absolutely battle. And with Bridges now and with Towns, you have the ability to spread out some of that scoring as well. And so I think this Knicks team is going to be awesome. Even if OG only plays 50 games, I think this Knicks team is going to be great. I have them at 52.5. The Orlando Magic, I have them as an undervalued team this year, so we got to go over the 47.5. Scoring the basketball was difficult for them last year, and that could be something that I think, again, comes up in the playoffs, but I think the effort they have defensively on a night-in, night-out basis, and it is a bit of a statement on where the NBA is, that effort on a nightly basis is enough to win you basketball games, but the Knicks did it. I think they're going to do it again this year, and this team is going to do it. I think they're going to be just motherfuckers to play against. And defensively, they are going to be able to lock a lot of teams down. I think KCP fits what they do defensively and is upgrade enough that the offense should take a bit of a step. A couple of the kids look good at the Olympics, so and given a little bit more progression for Wagner and for Banchero, I think this team, again, continues to improve. So I think Orlando gets there at over 47.5. a half. Philadelphia, 52 and a half. This may shock you. We're going under. 52 and a half. They have said we're not a regular season team. Everything now is focused on the playoffs. So it's not going to be about Embiid playing 65 games to get an MVP. It's not going to be about really grinding out win after win after win. They are going to just get into the tournament, hope that Maxey, Embiid, and PG-13, PG whatever, Paul George is healthy at the right time, and they can go on a run in the postseason. That does not equal regular season wins. So again, this isn't a statement on their overall health as a team, although I have some issues about that. But in terms of just what they can do in the regular season, I think they're going to be sitting it out a little bit. And so I like them under 52 and a half. Finishing strong in the East. Out in Toronto, 30 and a half is the total. You can see a world where it is over, where Scotty Barnes continues to progress quickly now with a full year. Fits perfectly with what Scotty Barnes can do, and those two just mesh. And RJ Barrett finds again the Olympics of him version of him, and this team actually puts up some points and can actually win. On the flip side of it, this offense can get bogged down in the mud a lot, and there isn't a whole lot of depth there. And so I do think that now. And you hear the talk like Pirtle saying like, look, it's not about this year. We know that. I feel like they are already kind of defeated before the season even gets going. And so I think they are an under at 30 and a half for the Raptors. We're going to do a more in-depth Raptor season preview coming up on the show tomorrow. And lastly, in the East, it's the Washington Wizards. This one's an easy under at 30 and a half as well. I don't know where you're getting 30 wins from this team from. I think that anything that can be moved by the trade deadline will be moved. I think that it is a basketball team that just has a few pieces that look intriguing that aren't any good together. And I think it's going to be one of the worst teams in the league. I think they have a real opportunity again to get a high draft pick. So now, where does everybody line up? Well, firstly, for division winners, I don't know if the Knicks are going to go so far over as they get Boston. That they catch Boston for that division. But let's look at some of the division prices here real quick for some of the teams that we have in some of these spots here. Let's go NBA. Let's go futures. Show odds. Divisions. Atlantic. So the Knicks are plus 300 to win the division. It's actually not bad. I actually don't mind that one. We're going to do a little bit of a highlight on that to make sure we remember that. We'll pick the Knicks to win the division. So that inherently means we have to have the Knicks ahead. Man, I did not realize how much the white background on my Google lit me up a little bit. Okay, we're bouncing around with a couple of things here. We got to make sure we got the play-in bracket all right. And then we go here. And again, none of you can see me doing this. And I should definitely figure out how to do these on a screen, so y'all can kind of follow along with me as well here. But just setting up the playoff bracket for the Eastern Conference. Ba-boom, ba-boom. Took up way too much room on this page. So we're going to have to go to a different page now for the next one. None of this matters to you guys. Apologies. I should have this organized by now. But we're going to put these teams now in the orders that I think they're going to go. Oh, we did not. Did I put Charlotte? I did put Charlotte. They were an under for me at 29 and a half. And that's a circle as well. So we have the Knicks to win the Atlantic Division. And that, I do think, means they will be your 1 seed. Boston, I think, will be right there as the number 2 seed. For our Central Division winner, the odds are Milwaukee are the favorites at minus 125. Get wrecked with that. Cleveland at plus 200 to win the Central Division. I like it. I actually like that quite a bit. So we will go Cleveland there to win the Central. And again, the highlighter comes out for that particular play as well. And then in the Southeast, who do they have winning it? I'm assuming, Orlando minus 161. Miami might be a bit of a value play there, but I don't see that necessarily happening there. So Cleveland we do have as our 3 seed. We do have Orlando coming in as our 4 seed. Philadelphia seems like they would be the next ones up. Actually, I think, well, I did take under on Indy at 46.5. That's might be a little bit low. So I do think that it is going to be Philly coming in as the 5 seed. We will have Indy coming in as the 6. So that means it will be Miami as our 7 seed. Coming in at the 8 seed is going to be Milwaukee. Holy crap. Our 9th seed, oof, this is where it gets tough. Is there an obvious one here? I don't think so. Atlanta might get it. I don't think they're it. So the teams that are left for this, I have Detroit getting in, so I'm putting Detroit as my 9. And then, god damn, maybe it is Atlanta. Yeah, Atlanta's getting in as a play-in team. That is just gross. Oh, I hate that so much. But Atlanta is it. They're a play-in team. So now, let's play this thing out. Milwaukee probably beats Miami. Well, no, you know what? Miami beats Milwaukee. So we get a rematch, Miami-Boston. Milwaukee, I don't think it matters. I think Detroit probably win. Well, no, Atlanta has the experience. Atlanta wins the play-in, but Milwaukee kicks the tar out of them. And so they go on to the Garden to face the Knicks. So the Knicks, they move on. Boston moves on. I think Indy gives Cleveland problems in the East, and that's what happens there. And then I do think Philly probably gets by Orlando in the next round. So Philly comes in the 5 seed. They move on to the second round at least. Then we get the reseeding. So it would be the Knicks. No, it's not reseeding. It's just full bracket style. Sorry. I keep screwing all this up. It would be the Knicks against Philly, and it would be Boston against Indiana in the conference semifinals. And so you would get Knicks, you would get Boston, New York Knicks versus Boston Celtics in the NBA's Eastern Conference Final. And that is where I think this gets really interesting. And I think that is where Kristaps Porzingis being back and healthy presumably gets them the win. And so I have the Boston Celtics winning the Eastern Conference. So those are the plays there out east. All right, just ran through the East. What about the West Conference? Western Conference, as some people would call it. We begin with the reigning and defending Western Conference champions. They are the Dallas Mavericks. Their total comes in at a whopping 49.5. They were one of the teams that I had undervalued going into this year. They won basically that same amount of games last year, and I think they are going to be significantly better this season. When you look at the moves that they made mid-season and how that turned things around for them, again, on both ends of the floor, this is still not going to be like the Rick Carlisle lockdown Pistons of the 2004. But this is going to be, I think, a team that can go out and play enough defense that this great offense is going to help. And I do think Klay Thompson makes a real difference with this team this year and is just the spot-up shooter that we all know and love him to be. And I think he really grows into kind of this Ray Allen type of a spot. And so I do understand I am looking at all of this as best case scenario for this team. And you got best case scenario Kyrie last year. But I think even if either Kyrie gets hurt or there is some kind of a weird thing that only happens with Kyrie, I think that this ends up being still a really good basketball team. And so I gotta go. I gotta go with Dallas over the 49.5. And we are going to give that one a little bit of a circle for that particular play. The Denver Nuggets, they come in at 51.5. I think it's an under. I think that Jamal Murray looked so bad at the Olympics, and this team is, I think, going to spend this year figuring out which young players fit where. I don't think they're, like, again, I think that the years of gearing up for a Jokic MVP are done. I think the years of going out winning 60 games are done. I think that they are mainly focused on where do our young players fit And how can we kind of maximize this? And I think that's going to lead to some growing pains out in Denver. So I have them under 51.5. The Golden State Warriors at 43.5. This one, it's tough because obviously things didn't go well last year. And now Clay is gone. I do think that they kind of recovered a little bit, but it is now up to the Kumingas, the Moody's, and the Pajemskis of the world to get this thing going. Another thing that I think you have to take into account, they got an MVP level season from Steph Curry last year. And I'm not doubting that he can do it again. I'm just saying you got all of that and you still barely squeaked in to the play-in, right? So I don't have high hopes for this team. It's not fun going against Steph Curry, so we're not going to click on this one by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's an under 43.5. The Houston Rockets out in the Southwest Division. Bet you didn't know that. Their total is at 43.5. I'm going over on this one, baby. I think that this was one of the teams we talked about when it was looking at what young players have a chance to take a couple steps this year. Houston has like 3 of them. And you have another year with Fred VanVleet and another year with Dylan Brooks and all these guys kind of locked in. Another year of Ime implementing his systems. I think that this team has a chance to really make some noise in the NBA's Western Conference. And so I think the Houston Rockets have a chance to flirt with 50 wins, quite frankly. Up next, it is going to be the LA Clippers. This is an easy under for me, folks. You have Kawhi Leonard, probably not ready for the start of the season. Who knows how much he's going to play at all this year. And so that leaves the keys to the car with James Harden and kind of nobody else. I hate this roster. I hate that it's going to be just James Harden iso ball for probably 45, 50 games of this year. I think they're going to be absolutely abysmal. And so I have Clippers under 37.5. Lakers 43.5. Again, I think it's under this. I think you got almost best case scenario last year. And maybe there is an upgrade from Darvin Ham to JJ Redick, but I don't think so. I don't think that it is going to be a substantial one anyway. I don't think they brought in anyone that really changes how you view this team at all. And then you have the Bronny thing kind of hanging over all of it as well. There's more ways this goes wrong than more ways that it's all of a sudden a 48-win team or anything like that. I just don't see it. Memphis, they were one of my overvalued teams in the offseason. I understand the excitement around Ja Morant and all of those guys coming back, and this team that was awesome a few years ago now getting a chance to be awesome again. But again, we are banking on the health, which already we had a scare in the preseason, and there's already a few different injury things going on with this group. And so while I do think that this is going to be an improved basketball team, I think that is a gigantic jump to assume from this team. So I'm going to go under 47.5 for Memphis. Minnesota at 52.5. I think that they got exactly what they needed from the Karl Anthony Towns trade. And so while you do kind of lower the talent level a little bit, I do think the fit is so much better. The one concern is definitely Julius Randle and how ball stoppy he can be, because Ant can kind of be a little bit of that as well sometimes. And so I do think you get a bit of a motivated Julius Randle coming out here, just launching threes and being the all-NBA player he can be. I think Anthony Edwards, that Olympic experience, always seems to help some of these guys. And I think DiVincenzo really helps this bench unit and just kind of gives a little bit more structure to what they have throughout the lineup. So I think Minnesota, I think it's an over. I like this team a lot, and I think Anthony Edwards has a chance to really take a step up this year. The New Orleans Pelicans at 45.5. I go back and forth on this one so much because the Ingram thing is such a distraction and it's such an awkward situation where you were basically like, yeah, he's going to be traded. And now it's opening night and it's like, well, guess not. And so that can be something that hangs over. But also, Zion was basically healthy last year. He looks in shape and he was everything we wanted Zion to be in that play-in game, dragging them close with the Lakers, and then he ends up getting hurt, and it's a bit of a bummer. But I genuinely think that superstar dominant player is still in there in Zion Williamson. And so even with all the distractions, and even with an improved Western Conference, it's an over for me at 45.5 for New Orleans. For Oklahoma City, Hartenstein gets hurt for a little bit. Their total is at 56.5. I don't care. It is a high total. It is probably too high of a total. I'm taking it. This team could win 60 games easily. They are such a beautifully constructed team. Even with Hartenstein going out for a while, the addition of Caruso to help out with things defensively, I think is just fantastic. I think this team fits together so well when Hartenstein is back, and even when he's not, there's enough out there that they can still, it's just going to be a really good basketball team. And so I love over 56.5 for OKC. For the Phoenix Suns, their total is at 47.5. I like the over on this one. I think that this is going to be, I think, a bit of a year where they kind of put some things together. I think Booker having a really good Olympic experience, Kevin Durant still being him, and I actually think they kind of got the most out of what they could with limited cap space and everything in the offseason. So I think that they handled that situation really, really well. This is actually a pretty good basketball team with a lot of high-end talent at the top part of it. So I like Phoenix to go out and to get the job done. I think that they put on a really good regular season. Just kind of remind everyone how good a lot of their players are. Portland at 22.5. I think that this is one where, because you have Flag at the end of the rainbow where everything could be really exciting, I think that this is an opportunity now for Portland to maybe bottom out a little bit and get one more kick at it and then really start to grow next year. They have some pieces that I like, but I think it is going to be under 22.5. Toxic, I see the question. I'll get to it in just 1 second. Just going to wrap up the last three teams first, and then we'll get back to the Minnesota thing. Sacramento, 46.5. I had them as an undervalued team. I love this team this year. I think the addition of DeMar DeRozan gives them a little bit of half-court scoring that maybe they sometimes miss when things get bogged down against some of those more experienced teams. I think it allows them to have one of, if not two, of Fox, Sabonis, and DeRozan on the floor at basically all times, and I think it makes them a really, really scary team. So I love this Sacramento group. I have them well over at 46.5. San Antonio Spurs, it's an over for me at 36.5. I think that just bringing in Chris Paul to be that adult in the room and to get those entry passes to Wemby is going to unlock so much more of this offense. And Wemby, again, coming off of the Olympics, where he almost single-handedly, with maybe a bit of officiating help, led France to a gold medal against a dream team-esque team in the United States. I think he's brilliant, and I think that there is a real chance he wins MVP this year. I think he drags this team to probably close to 500. I have them over. Utah, 29.5. It's an under. For a couple of years, they've had really great starts to the season and then traded a bunch and fallen off. I don't think they mess around with a good start to the season this year. There are a couple talented players on this team. I don't see it. I really don't. I think the West has gotten quite a bit better, and I think that they are going to get their asses kicked on a pretty regular basis. And so I like getting Utah and only needing them to win 29 games and have it still be a win for me. Toxic in the chat asking, did Cat trade make Minnesota better, worse, or about the same? Talent-wise, I do think it made them worse. Like, I think NBA 2K overall rating, it makes them worse. But it makes the puzzle pieces fit a little bit better. And so I think long-term it makes them a better basketball team. So I am going to say better for this group. I think that you still have Naz Reid, who absolutely balled out with no Karl Anthony Towns there last year. You have Julius Randle, who is very motivated in the final year of his contract to go out and prove that he can still be an all-NBA type of a player and provide a real spark to this team on offense. And you have Dante DiVincenzo, who spent some pretty good stretches being the best player on the floor in a playoff series when the Knicks were playing the Sixers and it was both bench units out there. I think that the experience and, again, the structure that he can bring is really going to help that second unit out in Minnesota and maybe even help them close games. I would have to figure out how that roster would work, but I think that he is going to be such a kind of stabilizing force for this Minnesota team. So I have to say they get better with that. All right, now it is time to make a couple picks on this one. And so we begin Northwest Division winner, Oklahoma City, the clear favorite to win this one at minus 143. And yeah, I think we just kind of have to pencil in OKC as the 1 seed right now. Pacific Division winner, the Phoenix Suns are at plus 170. Sacramento plus 250. I'm not getting all the value I want out of that one. So I'm not going to make that play. I wish it was a little bit higher. I thought it was maybe a bit more of a bold call. So I think Phoenix still ends up as the division winner in the Pacific Division at plus 170. I just don't know if we're getting the value that we necessarily want for that. But I do think Phoenix does finish as the 2 seed. I think that it will be Minnesota as the 3. Denver finishes at, oh man, I have Denver finishing at the 4, but I don't know because we have to go to the Southwest. Dallas Mavericks plus 100 to win that division. Man, Houston Rockets at plus 650 is enough for me to actually roll with and to actually... That might be a bit of a sprinkle play here. Enough value to have me think. I just think that they could have a real big breakout type of a season. So I'm going to have them as the 5. I'm going to have Dallas as... God damn. Man, the West is tough. Because I'm talking all this shit about how great I think Sacramento's going to be. And now I have them in the play-in. That's where the West is this year. And then... I think I've got the 3 teams in the Northwest, right? OKC, Mini, and Denver. Am I missing anyone who needs? Yeah, after that it's Utah at plus 50,000 to win the division. So that's good. We've chopped off that division. That's great. We got to get New Orleans in here. So they're going to be my 8. We're going to have Memphis come in as the 9. And so now we have 1 spot left for San Antonio, Golden State, and the Lakers. Man, this is, you know what? I'm take committed on Wemby being the guy this year. I think Wemby does it. I think San Antonio gets into the play-in. Let's do it. Let's get crazy. Let's have some fun with it, shall we? So we're going to get San Antonio there in. So our play-in, we're going to have Sacramento move on. They'll beat New Orleans, so they'll be the 2 seed against Phoenix. We will have... Yeah, I think regardless of how the other play-in goes, New Orleans is getting in. So, again, I'm going super bold and having 1 through 8 in both. Oklahoma City against the New Orleans Pelicans. Again, I can talk all this about Zion and all this growth and everything like that. OKC is just kind of too perfect right now, so I will go with them. Phoenix against Sacramento. I think this is where I'm going to get my boldness for Sacramento. I'm going to say the Kings advance to the Western Conference semifinals with a victory there. Minnesota against Dallas. That is such a fun series again, but I do think, again, Dallas comes up with that victory, so I will have Dallas advancing there, and then Denver I do think beats Houston, so we get a semifinal of OKC, Denver, and Sacramento against Dallas. The Western Conference final would then be OKC versus, we will say Dallas again, and I think OKC gets the job done. OKC versus Boston in the NBA Finals, and I just think Oklahoma City is built perfectly, and I love how they're constructed. Oklahoma City, my NBA champions for the year.